So now I'm delighted to hand you over to Liam O'Sullivan. Liam is the Executive Director of Care Alliance Ireland, and he's going to present the opening address. Liam will also be introducing our first presenter, David Grayson. Thanks very much, everyone, and I'll see you all a little bit later on.
Thank you, Lisa. Hello and welcome to this morning's seminar. The aim of this morning's webinar, in fact, is to promote the awareness amongst employers about the skills family carers can bring to the workplace. Kaleidoscope, which is a project operating within Care Alliance Ireland, has been running since March 2021, and to date 63 people have participated in it. From our experience, lack of confidence was a huge issue for many participants at the start of the course. At the end of the 12-week course, we see a significant change in confidence and work readiness. And this has been backed up by an objective evaluation, which my colleague Zoe will present on later in the morning. At the end of participants' participation in Kaleidoscope, they generally present a back to work plan and again report that they are looking for employment or have secured employment or applying for further education or indeed applying for voluntary work. In some cases, they're not yet ready to return to the paid workforce, but they are more aware of the challenges they need to overcome and have the information and identified the supports to work towards securing such employment. As Kaleidoscope was rolled out, we noticed that there are a lot of employment returnships available, but these are generally for full-time roles. The majority of the family carers we work with are generally in receipt of either carers allowance or benefit, and thus there is a limit on the amount of hours they can work, in this case up to 18.5 hours per week, before they lose income supports for their caring role. We feel that there's a lack of awareness about this 18.5 hour limit, and we want to change this. If some new job openings could be reduced to perhaps 18.5 hours per week and incorporate a level of flexibility, we believe and are confident that employers could likely attract a candidate who is reliable, committed, resilient, demonstrates high levels of empathy, has plenty of life experience, and is loyal. Last week, the Minister for Children, Roderick O'Gorman, brought a draft of a new work-life balance bill aimed at providing more family-friendly workplace. This new bill will bring the European Union's work-life balance directive into Irish law. So we're here today to tell you what the benefits family carers can bring to the paid workplace. We are hoping to secure additional funding for our project, for this work readiness project, and if successful, we'd be delighted to work in partnership with employers to ensure a successful transition into the workplace. Finally, thank you to our team in Care Alliance in putting all this seminar together. And I will now play a short address by Minister Heather Humphreys. Enjoy the morning.
Everyone. I would like to thank Liam O'Sullivan, the Executive Director of Care Alliance Ireland, for the invitation to address you today. I'm delighted to mark this Carer Aware webinar with a personal video message. From the outset, I want to acknowledge the important role that family carers play in society. As Minister, I remain fully committed in supporting you. The last number of years have been particularly challenging for our carers. For many, the pandemic led to increased isolation and fatigue. Your resilience and dedication to the role you play was nothing short of extraordinary. In responding to the COVID-19 crisis, my department made special provisions for those, including carers, who were most negatively affected at the time. People on carers allowance who lost their job due to the pandemic could keep their payment and get the pandemic unemployment payment. I increased the Carers Support Grant by €150 to €1,850, the highest amount since its introduction. Despite increased claim volumes, there have been substantial improvements over the past 2 years in reducing the time taken to decide claims. The average time to award the allowance was 4 weeks in 2021 compared to 14 weeks in 2019. As we emerge from the pandemic, we look forward to continuing to support our carers. In this regard, my department has utilised the Dormant Accounts funds for a number of years to support projects for family carers seeking to return to paid employment. I was delighted last October to award additional funding of over €180,000 to Care Alliance to build on the innovative work they are doing. The aim of today's webinar is to promote awareness among employers about the benefits of recruiting family carers as employees. Carers the length and breadth of the country are dealing compassionately with people who often have complex needs. I can say to any employer that having such a hard-working, resilient individual can only be an addition to your workforce. As you know, my department also provides very important income supports to carers. These include Carers Allowance, Carers Benefit, Domiciliary Care Allowance and the Carers Support Grant. In 2020, the number of hours a carer could engage in employment, education or training was increased from 15 to 18.5 hours. As part of Budget 2022, I announced measures which will allow carers to have a higher weekly household income and a higher level of savings and still qualify for a carers allowance payment. From June, the income disregard in the means test for carers allowance will increase from €332.50 to €350 for a single person and from €665 to €750 for a couple. The amount of capital disregard in the means test will be increased from €20,000 to €50,000, and I believe these changes will facilitate more carers who want to work if they are in a position to do so. Since my appointment, I've witnessed a strong relationship between the department and the carer organisations, and personally, I found this to be very positive and mutually beneficial connection, and events like this are part of that ongoing dialogue. I am confident that you will have an informative and productive morning. Goramila Mahakov.
Thank you, Minister, and to the officials who supported her in putting that together, who may indeed be in the audience here now. I'd like now to introduce David Grayson. I've known David for quite a number of years, primarily through our involvement in the European Carers movement with the organisation Euro Carers. David is currently chair of Leonard Cheshire Disability and immediate past chair of Carers UK. He's also the Emeritus Professor of Corporate Responsibility at the Cranfield School of Management in the UK. And indeed, he's the author of Take Care, How to Be a Great Employer for Working Carers. Over to you, David.
Liam, thank you very much. And I'm delighted to be part of your Care Aware webinar this morning. The Minister, Heather Humphreys, just talked about the past 2 years of the COVID pandemic and the challenges that that has created for all of us, whether we're involved in care or not. But of course, for carers, it has been a particularly tough 2 years. First of all, many more people have actually taken on caring responsibilities as paid care services either got curtailed or people felt it was inappropriate to have care workers come into their homes and potentially spread the virus or whatever. And we know, of course, that with many of the usual care respite services, daycare centres and so on having to temporarily close, that many existing carers also took on much bigger responsibilities, having to work even longer. So the challenges of the last 2 years should not be underestimated. But at the same time, I think that what we have seen over the last 2 years should be a huge opportunity for all of us who want to see better opportunities for carers, either at the end of their caring journey, to be able to come back into the job market or to enter the job market in some cases for the first time, but also for many more people who are currently juggling a job and caring for a loved one to be able to get a far better deal. Let me just start, if I may, with two quotations. The first, both from America actually, the first is from a lady called Anne Marie Slaughter, who is now the president of the New America Foundation, but is a very distinguished academic. She's written some important books, not least on caring, but also a very distinguished former diplomat. She was Hillary Clinton's director of strategy when Hillary Clinton was US Secretary of State. And during the course of the pandemic, Anne Marie Slaughter said this: the coronavirus and its economic and social fallout is a time machine to the future. A time machine to the future. Changes that many of us predicted would happen over decades are instead taking place in the span of weeks. And then more recently, Larry Fink, who is the founder and the chief executive officer of BlackRock, which is the biggest institutional investor in the world, managing trillions of dollars on behalf of investors. And I think has been producing annual letters to business every January since 2012. And in this year's letter, he wrote this: the pandemic has turbocharged an evolution in the operating environment for virtually every company. The relationship between a company, its employees, and society is being redefined. Now, why do I start with those quotations from Anne Marie Slaughter and Larry Fink? Because I think they emphasize a very important point about the fact that we have seen all over the world during the course of the last 2 years, with the pandemic and the global lockdowns and all of the consequences of that, ways in which organization after organization has innovated in a whole range of fundamental ways that people either didn't think was possible or thought would take so long to change. We've in particular seen that flexible working, working from home, working remotely is perfectly doable. We've seen the roof does not fall in if people are not in their offices 5 days a week. Now, of course, I recognize fully that I'm talking about probably most of us on this Zoom call this morning who are in some way knowledge workers. If you are a nurse, if you are a shelf stacker or a checkout assistant in a supermarket and so on, you continue to have to go into work, and thank goodness so many people were willing to do that during the course of the pandemic. But for many, many people, the pandemic of the last 2 years has shown that remote working, working flexibly and so on is perfectly doable, is perfectly achievable. So that seems to me to create an opportunity as we come out of the crisis of the last 2 years to be able to build forward better and not to simply go back to business as usual, not to revert to the situation before March of 2020, but to see what were the things that have worked well in the last 2 years that we can learn from, that we can build upon. And then secondly, you have the very specific context as part of the EU. Sadly, the country I know best, we don't have that opportunity for the time being, but inside the European Union, you have the important opportunity from the Work-Life Balance Directive, which I know that the EU passed the Parliament in August of 2019, and there is now a new bill before the Dáil to take effect to that in terms of Irish legislation as well. So we have both the macro picture and the macro opportunity, and we have the very specific micro legal opportunity to be able to make some progress in terms of better support for working carers. And I was struck in looking at some of the questions before today's webinar, where a number of guests joining us this morning said they would like to know more specifically about what are the kind of practical things that any employer, whether it's a global business with its Irish operations, or whether it's a very small business in Donegal or in Cork, etc., what any business of any shape or size can actually do very practically to support working carers. And I'm indebted to my former colleagues in Carers UK, where Carers UK for many years has run a specific network of employers for carers. And Employers for Carers talks about 5 practical areas that any employer of any shape or size, public sector, third sector, charity, voluntary organization, as well as any business, can do. And it's the 5 P's of preparation, of policy, of promotion, of practice, and peer support. Last one's a little bit of a cheat, I know, but it's the nearest to the alliteration we could get. So let me just explore each of those in turn. In terms of preparation, ideally, an organization will already have some sense of at least some people who are a working carer in their organization, who are juggling their job and looking after a loved one, whether that's an elderly relative, typically mum or dad, who now needs some help with daily living, or perhaps with a partner who's got a long-term health condition, or maybe a disabled son or daughter or brother or sister who needs some support, either physical disability or learning disability, or perhaps somebody with some severe mental health challenges. The reality, of course, though, is it will be the good employers who are already trusted by their employees, where there is a good relationship, where it is more likely that more employees will have already shared with their employers the fact that they are juggling their job and looking after a loved one. Why do I say that? Because we know from research in Canada, in the USA and elsewhere, that some working carers are incredibly nervous, indeed scared in some cases, about telling their employer that they are also a carer. Now that, of course, for me is a sign of a pretty toxic work environment where the employer is not trusted by their employees. So this is where the wider questions about the culture of the workplace, is this a great organization to work for generally? Is the organization trusted? And in organizations where there are low trust levels, I fully recognize it's going to be harder to build up an accurate picture of who are your working carers, how many you've got. What we do know, and I'm not sure what the figures are in Ireland specifically, in my country, the UK, we know that somewhere around 1 in every 7, at least, of the average working population are going to be at any one time juggling their job and caring for a loved one. So broadly speaking, that gives you a sense of of numbers. And the preparation by a good employer will be, first of all, getting some understanding of at least who are some of our working carers, so that the good employer can consult with them and ask those working carers, what are the kind of practical steps that would make life easier for them? So consulting with the people who know best, the people who are actually working carers, is really a very important part of preparation and the experience of many organizations who've already gone some way down this journey in terms of supporting carers. And the good news for anyone who is now starting out from scratch is that a lot of other organizations around the world have been supporting their working carers for a few years now. And so there's a lot of good practice, or at least working practice, that others can learn from. So you don't need to start with a completely blank sheet of paper. Steal with pride, as Tom Peters, the great American management guru says. Learn from others. So that's part of the preparation. The second P after preparation is about policy. So first of all, the organization, public sector, third voluntary sector or private sector, will already have various people policies, HR policies. So start with looking at those existing policies and see how you might carer-proof those policies. How, for example, you might look at existing workplace policies in relation to flexible working and leave and so on, and how might you make them more adaptable and more relevant and more helpful to your working carers. But then as you get more confidence, I think most organizations will want to see what are some of the specific elements of a carer policy that would be relevant for us based on what we have learned from talking with the working carers we've already identified. So do we already have some form of carer leave? How might we extend this? So some organizations in my country, organizations like British Gas, for example, Centrica, for a number of years now, have offered 5 days of paid carer leave, where any employee who's registered as a carer can simply say, I need a half day, or I need a full day off, or 2 days off to fulfill part of my caring responsibility. British Gas, Centrica did the numbers. They worked out the business case for why it made economic sense. Leave aside any kind of question of morality or being a good employer, it just made good business bottom line sense in terms of retaining talent, in terms of retaining expertise, to make sure that people who did have the dual responsibilities of the job and caring for a loved one didn't get so exhausted and weren't having to use up all of their holiday entitlement on hospital visits to the dentist with the person that they were caring for, whatever it may be. Because actually, it's a real false economy to have working carers using all of their holiday entitlement to cover their caring responsibility. So looking and thinking, how do we build on any legal minimum in terms of unpaid right to carer leave? Can we actually afford, and this will be obviously an individual business decision, but can we afford to offer some paid carer leave as well? And of course, as part of the directive, there's also an extension of the right to ask for flexible working. I go back to my opening remark. we know now that flexible working remotely is far more feasible. And I think as we look ahead, organizations like Deloitte, the big global consultancy and accountancy firm, have been doing a lot of work on the future of work. And they talk about the future of work, what is the nature of work itself, but also the future of the workforce, and how do we, in fact, create many more opportunities for a wider range of people to come into and to stay in the workforce, and also the nature of the workplace itself. And all of the research that I have seen from Deloitte globally, but also from a number of other organizations in the last few months, all suggests that most of us, not all of us, but most of us are going to want to have, going forward, a mix. Relatively few people, according to the Deloitte research and other research that I've seen, say they want to be working full-time from home. And relatively few people are saying they want to go back full-time into the office environment. Deloitte analysis suggests there's going to be much more a mixture of some working from home, some working on the client's premises, on mission, if you like, some working in conventional offices, but also a lot more working in satellite offices, much closer to home, the kind of WeWork type facilities and things, which means that the notion of the long daily commute of the pre-COVID era is probably a thing of the past for most people. And that, of course, creates all kinds of opportunities to support them working carers better. I don't know whether you spotted, but here in the UK, just a few days ago, Deloitte, practicing what they preach, walking their talk, announced that they were cutting back very substantially on the amount of office space that they have in London, because they don't think they're going to need it anymore, and they can save money, obviously, as a process. So preparation, and then policy, and then thirdly, promotion. It's no point in organizations having all kind of good policies if no one knows about them. So having effective communication of the policies that an organization has to support its working carers. Some countries have annual carers' rights days, or carers' weeks, or carers' months, where they exist. It's a really useful kind of coat hanger, if you like, to hang on an individual employer's own promotional activities for what it's doing to support its working carers. One of the organizations I've looked at quite a lot over recent years, in terms not just of their policies to support their working carers, but their wider responsible business practices and being a good employer, a great employer overall, is the Australian bank Westpac. And Westpac have been one of the real leaders in recent years in terms of support for working carers, in terms of flexible working, in terms of letting people work part-time and so on. And they have used a number of these kind of external opportunities, like Carers Week, to be able to have a real push on what they are trying to do to support working carers, and why, therefore, it's sensible, it's helpful for working carers to identify themselves. I actually joined the then CEO of Aviva, the big insurance company, a few years back now, when I was chair of Carers UK, to help them to launch a big push on a number of Aviva working carers policies. And he and I travelled down to Bristol in the southwest of England, where Aviva has a huge office with several hundred employees, and they were doing a real concerted push in that major office to highlight during Carers Week and on also on Carers Rights Day separately, opportunities for working carers. It's really very, very practical for any employer of any size to be able to make information available for their working carers about help, not just from the employer, but that's available through the Care Alliance in Ireland and other organizations, for instance. I had, as Liam said, 8 years as the chair of Carers UK. And if I had a euro for every time that a carer came to me in one of our annual meetings or one of our members' meetings around the country, and they said to me, David, if only I had known at the beginning of my caring journey all the things I know now, how much easier would it have been to be a good carer? So I am a passionate believer in helping carers, first of all, to identify that they are themselves actually a carer. I was several years into my own caring journey, looking after first my late dad and then my late mum, before I realized that I was a carer and actually also a working carer. I probably would never have done so, but for the fact that the then CEO of Carers UK, a lady that Liam will remember well, Helena Herklotz, actually invited me into her office because she was trying to persuade me to join the board of Carers UK. And she knew from something we'd done together before that actually I was a carer, but she had a shrewd suspicion that I didn't think of myself as such, and she was right. I hadn't really until that moment. I just thought I was doing what any good son or daughter should do in terms of looking after their parents as they were starting to need some more help and so on. But there is a real role for employers to be able to help people to recognize that they might be a carer, because we all know there is a constant revolving door of people starting their caring journey and others finishing their caring journey. So helping to get people to identify themselves and to help them to be able to access information by putting up links on if a company has an intranet or other information databases that are accessible to employees, putting up links between the intranet and, for example, information through Care Alliance Ireland and so on. But also, of course, many employers will have an EAP, one of those 3-letter abbreviations, a TLA, an EAP, the Employee Assistance Programs. And I'm struck by how still a lot of even quite sophisticated employers aren't really being proactive in talking to the provider of their employee assistance program and simply challenging them to say, what kind of provisions have you got that we could make available to our employees through the existing EAP? So challenging your employee assistance program provider, who in many cases will already have a number of possible options, whether it's a kind of care concierge service or whatever. And when we think about promotion, I think there is also a critical role for leaders at different levels of the organization to be prepared to come out and to talk about the fact that they themselves are a working carer. Because if your line manager or if you're head of the HR department, or the company secretary, or the chief marketing officer talks about their own experiences juggling their job and caring for a loved one, how much easier that makes it for people more junior in the organization to do so. So when I wrote my Take Care book back in 2017, I made a point of particularly profiling and telling little micro stories about a number of the individuals who were indeed working carers in leadership roles in their organizations. People like Tim Fallowfield, the company secretary in Sainsbury, one of our big major UK retailers, for example. And I understand it's for many senior people, particularly in big businesses, it can sometimes feel a little bit awkward. Some people feel it's very personal, but actually them talking about their caring responsibilities makes it so much easier to encourage other working carers to come forward at different levels of their organization. We've seen a transformation in a number of societies in recent years about the way that we talk about mental health, and the fact that we now recognize much more that mental ill health is something that sadly many people will face during the course of a working life, and it's something therefore that should be talked about. But certainly in my country, when the CEO of Lloyds Bank, one of our biggest banks, talked very openly about his own mental ill health, I think that was enormously valuable in terms of others being willing to talk also about their own experiences and to encourage organizations to adopt, in that case, mental health first aiders and so on. So I would not underestimate the importance of getting senior people just to open up and to give an interview where they perhaps quite casually drop into the interview that this is part of who they are. I also happen to think it makes them much more human to the people that they are working with and are trying to inspire and to lead as well. And certainly in my book, I made a particular point of trying to profile men who were juggling their job and caring, as well as women, because I'm acutely conscious that too much of the burden of and the responsibilities of caring for loved ones falls on women, and this should be an equal opportunity, equal responsibility task. So preparation, policy, promotion, and then practice. And there are a number of very concrete things that organizations can look at, whether it's in terms of how to get their line managers to be able to spot somebody who perhaps is struggling a little bit and to understand why. I'm a huge believer in the importance of first line manager, supervisor training, because that is such a critical role. And having the supervisor, the line manager, who can sensitively understand the kind of reasonable adjustments that may not be hugely complex, typically they're not, may not cost anything, often they don't, but which would make a practical difference. So again, back to Sainsbury, saying to people who are registered as working carers, you can keep your mobile with you on the shop floor, so you have the mental reassurance that if somebody is trying to get hold of you urgently about mum or dad or whoever it is you're caring for, you're not having to worry, have you missed a critical phone call? And providing, for instance, a private room if you know that you're going to have to take a call from the hospital or from the doctor at a certain time, and so on. So those are the kind of practical readjustments that don't cost money, but which can make a huge amount of difference. But because obviously people are changing their roles, line managers, supervisors, and so on change too. So some organizations, and BT, the telecoms company, was one of the early champions of this, now have a carer's passport scheme, which means that if you've agreed some adjustments, some flexibilities in your working practices, perhaps to be able to leave early, or to have a car parking space close to the building in case you need to reserve for you, in case you need to leave early, or you have to come in a bit late. If you have those kind of adjustments agreed, that can be written up in a carer's passport that is then automatically available to your new manager if you are changing role or you have a new manager. Because for many of us, if we have those kind of adjustments, the last thing we really want is that the very first conversation with our new boss is, oh, by the way, we have these various dispensations. It's not necessarily the first kind of set of conversations you want to have with a new boss. And of course, the other practical things that organizations can be thinking about, and particularly in the context of today's webinar, the importance of helping people at the end of their caring journey to get back into the workplace. And very often that, as with your Kaleidoscope collaboration, that can very often involve a group of employers working together, perhaps through a local chamber of trade or local chamber of commerce. In the Thames Valley, just down the M4 from London, near to Heathrow, you have a number of big employers like Vodafone and Centrica again, who have come together on a joint project to make it easier to attract ex-carers into the workplace and then to support them when they have come back into work, so that perhaps some initial lacking in confidence or some of the other things that was talked about aren't insuperable barriers. I know when I was still on the Cranfield faculty, and I had a new PA who came to work for me, who actually had quite a gap in her CV. And we chatted about it, and it emerged because she had been a carer. I had assumed for her, well, perhaps a parent. Actually, it was very sadly for an adult daughter who'd passed away eventually. But she had been a carer for some time, and so was coming back into the job market quite late in her career after quite a long gap. And it was very clear at first that she was quite rusty. And she said, "I'm rusty, David. And I various things that I don't understand, some of these all these new technologies and so on. But my goodness, she was absolutely brilliant in terms of being able to transcribe a voice memo from my iPhone or Apple phone, whatever it might be. And my goodness, once she got over her initial nerves and things, what an incredibly loyal and hardworking person she proved to be. And in fact, is still helping me out now that I'm off the faculty and she's retired from the university. The reality is, and I'm sure in your Kaleidoscope project, you have discovered that if you have been a carer, particularly if you have been a long-term carer, then you have all kinds of transferable skills. You know how to multitask big time. You know how to manage budgets down to the last cent and so on. You are typically somebody who's got or acquired pretty good negotiating skills, and in particular being able to juggle different health and care external providers and so on. You've had to learn creativity and entrepreneurship in terms of finding resources, often when people don't want to give them to you, and you've had to learn diplomacy in terms of biting your tongue often, as you sometimes have to fight, I use that word advisedly, for the person that you are caring for and love. And you have certainly developed resilience big time. So, I mean, I think, you know, the kind of skills of carers, don't say to me that they're unskilled. They may not have some of the traditional ways of proving that skill. So we've talked about preparation and policy and promotion and practice. My last P, finally, very quickly, is about peer support. And this is where, in particular, an increasing number of employers are setting up networks of their employees who are carers. Centrica, again, was one of the organizations in my country that has had a carers network for a good few years and has really used it to push out information, to push out surveys about what might be further modifications of policies and so on. And of course, carer networks can learn not just from each other, but also from other kind of employee carers networks. I remember talking to the senior partner in PwC, another of the big four accounting and consulting firms, who was the sponsor and the senior level champion of the PwC carers network. And I mean, we had a fascinating conversation where actually he had decided that as he looked around the different PwC networks for their Black and Asian and other ethnic minority employees group, or for their older workers group, or for their women's network, or for their LGBTQ plus network, that one of the ones they could particularly learn from, because they seem to have done really well in the case of PwC, was their LGBTQ plus network in terms of being able to identify and bring in employees into their network. So learning from other types of employee networks is hugely valuable. I'm a huge fan of an organization called Purple Space, run by a great social entrepreneur called Kate Nash, who I first met more than 20 years ago in the disability world. Kate ran several of our disability charities before starting Purple Space as a kind of clearinghouse of expertise amongst disabled employee networks. And she produced a superb guide for people wanting to set up and run networks of disabled employees. And as I read her guide a few years back, upon my preparation for writing Take Care, I realized, gosh, take out the word disabled and put in working carer, and virtually everything in that guide was hugely, hugely relevant also for networks of working carers. And the other thing, of course, is the potential of exchanging learning from other employers, not least around the potential of all kind of technology and apps and so on. Carers UK has an app called Jointly, which you can download, and circles of carers, typically a group of family or friends caring for a loved one, can share information about, for example, changes of prescription, or who's going to take mum or dad to this hospital appointment, or whatever it might be. So the potential, and that of course is hugely valuable for those people who are caring at a long distance, who are having to travel long way to fulfill their caring responsibilities by comparison with where they live and work and so on. So I hope I've given some food for thought in terms of the ways in which we can support better our working carers. Why does this matter finally? It matters, I think, because we are seeing in many sectors skill shortages at the moment. We're seeing lots of job vacancies, and we need to make sure that any employer is able to harness all of the talent. And as Liam said right at the beginning, people who've had caring responsibility develop all kinds of ways and skills, and given them the chance, can be incredibly loyal employees. It's a win-win-win. The last thing employers want to do is to cut themselves off from experienced talent who has to leave their organization because they're not being supported as a working carer, or actually to exclude themselves from ex-carers coming back into the job market. So I wish you all every success as you build up more of an infrastructure to support working carers, to help ex-carers to get back into the job market. I think we've got a few minutes, Lisa, and Liam, for some questions. And if we can't cover them all today live on the webinar, very happy to try and deal with some of them afterwards.
Thanks very much, David. We're going to open up to anybody, if anybody has a question to ask David.
May I? May I, Lisa?
Someone talking there? Someone?
Yeah, may I?
Oh, Siobhan, is it? Siobhan,
Yes.
hi, how are you?
That's bad. I work in recruitment, David, so you're 100% right. We'll take any talent we can get and offer any flexibility that's required. A lot of the problem seems to be that they can only in Ireland earn up to €18 an hour. Like, we have flexibility in terms of the work that we offer, but is there an issue in terms of what carers understand they're allowed to do rather than what they're actually capable of doing? Because I think there seems to be a lot of fear with regard to the loss of entitlements, because it's so difficult to get your entitlements that anything that could put them at risk creates at times not unnecessary fear about going over the threshold and the complications that would cause.
Siobhan, thank you very much for the question. I'm not an expert on the situation in Ireland, so I will defer to Liam and Lisa and other colleagues in Care Ireland on any local research that may have been done into attitudes of carers. What we do know internationally is precisely as you say, that very often there is a fear that people will accidentally fall foul of rules about how much they can earn or how many hours they can work, and still retain their benefits. I think this is an area where there is a need for real collaboration between carers organizations doing the research, getting the evidence base, and then groups of employers and intermediaries like yourself, like search firms and recruitment specialists and so on, who see the challenge, but also the opportunity to be able to then work with officials and with the politicians to be able to build the maximum amount of flexibility into the system, because it's in everyone's interests to help ex-carers to be able to come back into the job market and to keep as many existing working carers juggling their job and caring for a loved one in work, even if they go down in their number of hours, etc.
No, I find that particularly interesting in the context of Heather Humphrey's comment about the 18.5 hours, because most part-time jobs are actually 20 hours, which means that employers don't realise that the upper maximum is 18.5. So it seems to be an easier transition in an employment context for somebody to go full-time into part-time hours in a caring context. But most employers, me included, didn't realise that the limit was 18.5 hours. So if I would have automatically offered a 20-hour working week, well, the hour and a half makes absolutely no difference and you'd be happy to do it. It seems to be through lack of knowledge with employer groups about carers allowance. It seems to be an easier conversation that you'd have with an existing employee to bring them onto, you know, carers leave or part-time hours to support them, as opposed to, I run a large temporary recruitment agency as well as permanent. So the flexibility, I probably have carers working for me that I don't realize, because they're not on 0-hour contracts, they're on if and when contracts, meaning that we'll offer them the work or they'll tell us when they're available and we'll accommodate them. But there's a huge, like, it's fantastic to be on this webinar this morning to get that level of information. But there's probably an opportunity to disseminate the information via CIPD, Lisa, as well, just to change policy contexts within organizations. So even for me, I'm already probably offering work to a lot of carers without realizing it, but separate to that, with our own permanent staff, I need to update our care policy.
Siobhan, I think, first of all, I'm sure that Zoe and Lisa and Liam and colleagues will be saying, yes, we've got an early webinar win already. And you're quite right. That's exactly the kind of practical points that I would be trying to work with existing groups like CIPD, like the Chambers of Commerce and so on, to make sure that information does get disseminated. Absolutely. Thank you. Do we have any other quick questions before we need to move on to the next session?
Lisa, I may, I don't know if Fiona's on the call there. Fiona's going to speak later around her initiative, very much around that 18.5 hours. And I think within the department, there's an acknowledgement that if you're in receipt of an income support, you have to be providing, you know, pretty high levels of care. So there is that balance. But Fiona, I know, and it incrementally went up from 10, I think, to 12.5 to 15 to 18.5. It's possibly a sense that that's as high we're going to get without compromising the kind of integrity of the income support payments. Now, that's not an official policy of our organisation, but I just have a sense that's as far as we could push it. Fiona, are you in the call there? Or I think she'll join us at 12. I see she's speaking about it. So that should be interesting to listen to what she's saying. Sorry, back to you, Lisa.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. Fiona's had to drop out for a few minutes, Siobhan, but I think you will find Fiona's presentation very interesting. There's probably areas there where the two of you can link together. Fiona is, I always call her a force of nature, and she's really, really passionate about pushing the 18.5 hours, and she has gone directly to employers as well, where she's seen an advertisement for maybe 20 hours and gone to them and said, look, I have a cohort of carers here who really want to work. Would you consider bringing the contract down to 18.5 hours? And she's had some really, really good success with that. So I think definitely you'll enjoy her presentation, because she's very passionate about that. David, I'm going to end it there, as I know you've agreed earlier on that if anybody does have any questions, because I know you have to leave now, but if anyone does have any questions, if they want to put it into the chat box, and myself and Caroline can field that to you at a later date. I just want to say thanks so much for being here with us today. It's great to have such a down-to-earth presentation. It's, you know, I was explaining your book to Caroline before I gave it to her, and which is quite hard to get now, David. And I was saying it's written in such a down-to-earth, informative manner. Most of you will have gotten David's book. For anyone who hasn't gotten it before today, we'll send it out this week. But I just think your presentation is excellent. I have questions myself, but I don't want to delay. the webinar. I have particular questions around where there is good practice around the world and to find out a bit more about that. But I've had private messages through the chat as well to say that it has resonated with people. And I totally agree with you that, you know, it doesn't have to be big money changes. Sometimes it's just a bit of empathy, and it's just about asking your employee what they need and making a few tweaks that actually help a situation. So yeah, I just want to say thank you very much for your excellent presentation. We're going to move on now, and thank you, David. Thank you
very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We're going to move on now. So we have Karen Kiernan to present now. Karen is the CEO of One Family, and she's going to talk about being a flexible employer. I'm going to pass you over to Karen now. Thank you, Karen.
We're not hearing her. I'm not hearing her.
No, she was here.
Her audio appears to be muted.
Okay, what we might do is, while we're trying to sort Karen out, is Caroline, do you mind playing the video, the Kaleidoscope video? So what we did was we had some extra funding, so we approached Pobble to ask if we could develop a promotional video on Kaleidoscope, which we will use, I suppose, to promote Kaleidoscope and raise awareness, but also to use for funding applications as well. So I think it gives a really good, clear synopsis of what Kaleidoscope is about. And of course, you know, the two presenters that will be listened to a little bit earlier on, Stephanie, or a little bit later on, Stephanie and Caroline are main features of the video. So just while we sort Caroline or Karen out, do you want to play that, Caroline? Sure. Yeah, great, thank you.
Kaleidoscope has given me an amazing amount of confidence. It has rebuilt my confidence that I lost.
Kaleidoscope is a 12-week program for family carers who want to return to the workplace. Some carers are out of the workplace for quite some time, or it might be just a short amount of time. We would find that lack of confidence is a huge thing for everyone, no matter how long they've been out. The 12 weeks focuses on the person and their journey towards being work ready. It's about trying to convince the carers themselves that they have so many skills, and the skills they have are so valuable to an employer.
I have been a carer for my daughter for the past 9 years. I was due to go back to work in the September when my daughter was born. She was diagnosed with a rare genetic condition. I entered into a caring role, which was not really on the agenda at the time. There I was 9 years later on Facebook and saw the Kaleidoscope course coming up. From the minute I logged on, I just felt at ease. For a carer, I think you don't do a lot of things for yourself. You're always focused on who you're caring for. So it was just a lovely way to enter into this course feeling just so appreciated.
We spoke to people just before they started the course, just at the end of the course, and then 3 months later. And what we found is that over time and through being part of the course and really taking in the course, people had an opportunity to reflect on themselves. And over time, we found out that they feel an awful lot better about themselves. They have a lot more confidence, and that is sustained over time, which is really unusual. It's something that keeps going after the course is finished.
Kaleidoscope for me is change. It just gave me the tools to be able to deal with life better, to deal with me, to rebuild my confidence. Everybody was just so supportive of each other, and everyone was so helpful.
It was just that time for me that I got to sit down, totally focus on what I was doing, and I was working towards something all the time.
It's about progress, and it's about having a plan, and it's about them getting a job when they're ready to get a job.
If you're a carer looking to re-enter the workplace, please get in touch today.
Thanks very much, Caroline. Karen, I see we have you with us here now. Can we hear you? No, you're still on mute, so we might try and get you sorted. But what we will do is, and I think it's very timely after the video on Kaleidoscope, is we will get Caroline and Stephanie to present. So Caroline and Stephanie were both participants in Kaleidoscope. Caroline was a participant in Kaleidoscope 1, and before Christmas, we identified some funding to employ a project assistant on Kaleidoscope, and Caroline applied and got the job, and I got a project assistant, which I was delighted with. Stephanie was a participant in cohort 2 of Kaleidoscope 2. When I asked Stephanie to present today, I thought it would be great to get representation from someone who's working towards employment, but very motivated to do so. But in between me asking Stephanie and today, Stephanie's gone and got herself a job. So it's not staged. She didn't have a job when I did ask her, but we're delighted to hear that Stephanie got a job. So I'm going to pass you over to Caroline and Stephanie, and there'll be time for some Q&A at the end as well. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Lisa. Good morning and welcome to everyone here today. Although my story is a personal one, I have written out my presentation here just so I don't leave anything out. It has been both an honour and a pleasure to have been part of planning and facilitating this webinar today. I want to thank Minister Heather Humphreys for her opening address and to David Grayson for his very informative presentation this morning. I think he pointed out just how all the little things really make a difference for carers like myself when they're being employed. He mentioned things like just being allowed to have a mobile phone on you, just to, if you do have an appointment, that, you're facilitated and that this is not something that's going to go against you in your working role. As you've all seen from the video, which we were really proud to launch here today, I'm part-time project assistant on the Kaleidoscope course and also previous participant. I've been a full-time carer for my daughter for the past nearly 10 years now. An unexpected life change that nobody can really prepare themselves for. So as David said, most caring roles fall on women, which did happen in my case. My husband is self-employed, so he works long hours, and therefore the caring role kind of fell solely on myself. I had just finished a degree in applied social studies when my daughter was born and was due to go back to work, but unfortunately had to put it on hold for a little while I met her caring needs. My journey with Kaleidoscope began back in May 2021 when I saw the advertisement for the course on Facebook. I suppose I was immediately drawn to the content that was being offered. It advertised, a real personal support along with, the more practical side of things such as CV building, interview skills and that kind of thing. I really yearned to get back to work, to have something for myself, as is the case with many carers that have been out of the workplace for a period of time. I was successful at interview and completed the 12-week online course, which I have to say was unlike any other course I've ever done. From the initial interview right through to graduation, there was such an amazing feeling of support, encouragement, and recognition for each and everyone's individual skills and talents. The weekly check-in sessions were of huge benefit to so many people, especially those who prefer to speak one-to-one about their individual situations. So these worked that Lisa would send out an email and offer a check-in session to each participant, and we would log on to a Zoom call with just the two of us and have a chat. So this was, a huge benefit to people that would feel maybe less confident talking in front of a whole group or wanted to discuss a particular situation. Group check-ins then, on the other hand, were provided to the participants with the opportunity to bond with each other, which worked remarkably well, even with the entirety of the course being delivered through Zoom. So a lot of WhatsApp groups were set up as well, and friendships bonded from the course. Life coaching sessions made available to every participant not only helped through the course learning, but also supported participants to put a plan in place to move on after the course had finished and put their plan into action. Replacement care costs were also offered so that participants would not lose out on attending the course for this reason. Another thing that just provided huge support and encouragement to all the participants on the course. Also, there was no pressure either that, you know, you felt that you had to get employment. Some participants decided that, you know, it actually wasn't the right time for them to go back to work or to look into getting a job, that their care needs were still, or their caring role was still, you know, wasn't going to fit in with the working role. And some decided maybe to go back to college and study further before they re-entered the workplace. So it was reassuring as well that there was no pressure during the course that you were obliged to get employment. I got so much from the course on both the personal and professional level, working on confidence, self-care, personality, and looking at the inner critic really encouraged me to take time to focus on myself and identify my own needs, as well as then focusing on the more practical elements of the course later on. The week before the course commenced, each participant received a care box, which was a really lovely personal touch. This immediately made each carer feel appreciated and empowered. So when the box arrived in the post for me, I was thinking, you know, it was quite a big box. I was thinking, oh my God, there's going to be so much content on this. How am I going to keep up with all the learning? And then I opened the box to discover, yes, there was some notes in it, a lovely folder with, you know, some printed material, but also a mug, some lovely candles, biscuits, some tea and coffee, which was just a lovely touch. And I think throughout the three cohorts, I think nearly every participant has commented on just how lovely it was to actually receive something in the post as a carer for yourself and to feel appreciated. I went into the course with the idea of maybe becoming an SNA, which would work well around school hours and holidays. After working through the 12 weeks, having one-to-one check-in sessions with Lisa and working with my chosen life coach, I graduated the course with an idea for setting up my own business. While researching my business idea, a job opportunity came up with Care Alliance for a project assistant on the Kaleidoscope course. As I got so much from the course myself, I decided to apply for the job in the hope of being able to give back some of the invaluable learning and advice and support I had received myself from the Kaleidoscope course facilitators, the life coaches, and of course, my fellow participants. I'm so happy to say that I'm sitting on this side of the camera now, I suppose. I was successful at interview and have been employed by Care Alliance on a part-time basis since January. Although I'm still a full-time carer for my daughter, with appointment commitments for her and everyone in my household coming down with COVID over the first 5 weeks when I started back to work, I have fulfilled my job role as required, displaying commitment, resilience, and excellent time management skills. I have to say that the support that Care Alliance has given to me as a carer during my time on the course and now in my job role has been just amazing. The fact that I can work from home gives me the opportunity to fulfill my caring role while also performing to a high standard in my work environment. If I do need to take time off during work hours to take my daughter to an appointment, there has never been an issue, as my line manager knows that I am committed to my job and I will be sure to make up these hours later in the day. Another invaluable element of the course is the ongoing support that is offered when the course finishes up. Check-in meetings are still available. Virtual coffee mornings are scheduled once a month, and we have a Kaleidoscope reunion lunch happening during Carers Week in June. This reunion will allow participants from the 3 cohorts to meet in person, enjoy a nice lunch, and go away with the tools on how they can support each other going forward from the 2 speakers that we have carefully chosen for the event. I would like to finish my presentation by saying thank you to Lisa for supporting me throughout the course. providing me with weekly check-ins during the course, and then continuing to meet with me after the course was finished, always providing me with excellent advice and guidance. Thank you to Caroline's for giving me the opportunity to return to work while also being able to fulfill my caring role. It really feels so empowering to have that bit of experience or independence back and to have something for myself. I took out David Grayson's book from the library a couple of weeks back to read up on a bit of the book before today. And there was a lady at the very start of the book, her name was Helen, she was working in Westpac. And a quote from her says that, "I go to work for my sanity and for my respite. My work life helps keep me sane." So that's where I am today. And I totally agree with her on that one. So I'd just like to say thank you again for everyone for attending the webinar today. And I will hand you over to Stephanie now, one of my fellow participants from cohort 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. I don't know how to follow that now. I've made a few notes myself as well. I'm on a different road to Caroline. I sole carer for my daughter Rachel. She'll be 38 in November. And I had been working, I retired in December 2020. I was working in financial services. I was working part-time. And I just found that to balance the two, it was fairly pressurized in that I didn't really like working from home. I liked to keep work there and home here. But anyway, I was sort of, for the next few months, I was enjoying not having to get up, go to work, no pressure, caring for my daughter. Then COVID struck and everything changed. Like I was with her and her services stopped. So then I was always looking out for something. I knew that I wanted to go back to work. I wanted to do something. But when I left work, like my confidence was shattered. My self-esteem was on the ground. I suppose you're just looking back now on reflection. You're just sort of, you're doing your work, and you're caring, you're just getting through each day. And when I saw again the advertisement, I was saying, I'd really like that, but I wonder, would I be able to do it? Would it be suitable for me? And so I filled out the application form and I got a call from Lisa. And I think I cried, Lisa, during our interview. And I was really just so, oh my God, can I do this? And do I have the confidence? But I was accepted onto cohort 2. So from September to December, I joined every week and I absolutely loved it. It was the first time I've done, quite a few courses over my lifetime, but this really resonated with me. It brought me out of my comfort zone. It got me thinking about me as a person. I found the person I was years ago. I started to think about things. And I often refer back to my notes that I made. I was also very interested in the element of the inner critic, because I think we do beat ourselves a lot. We really do. And following on from that session, I saw an opportunity to delve deeper into this on another course. So I did that, and then I proceeded to do another course on building blocks for success. And then I just finished a couple of weeks ago, following on for that, setting goals. So I find now that when I finished cohort 2, I really felt there was a new me. I was more confident, I was more outspoken. When beforehand I would always question and query, but I suppose I have people annoyed now. I'm doing it more so. But then I was very lucky, an opportunity. I always wanted to go back to work. And when I was looking at my notes last night, there was one element of the course, develop a plan. And what I wrote on that was to get a job in a small office, and it would be flexible and that I would enjoy it. I would be dealing with people. And when I looked at that again last night, I said, that is the job I have now. And this opportunity arose. I was asked if I would be interested in going back to work full time. And I said, no. I said, look, this is what I would be looking for. Then they came back to me and said, come up and have a chat. And I was really nervous because it was over 20 years since I'd had an interview. And thanks to Kaleidoscope, I went through the interview skills. I got my CV sorted, which is something, again, I hadn't done for years. But I went up to that interview and I was extremely confident. And I was like, this is me. This is what I can do. And when I said that, look, these are the holidays, the times I would need to take off because I don't have any support, caring for my daughter. And they said, that's no problem at all. We'll get you a laptop, you can work from home. Now, I'm quite happy to work from home now. I'm still learning, and it's a completely different job to what I was involved with. It's a training institute, but I'm really enjoying it. And I started 2 weeks ago, and I just said, like 2 weeks ago, last week, I said, oh my gosh, I really love my job. And I can't remember the last time I said that. So that is all down to Kaleidoscope. And I'd like again to say thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you to everybody. And thank you for bringing this course on board, because there are so many others out there that are going to benefit from it. And we made great friendships with like-minded people. We all had the one thing in common. We were carers. And if we felt bad or whatever, there was always somebody there to pick you up. They knew what you were going through. And that is what it's all about. And again, I'd like to say thank you so much. And just excuse me, my dog is barking. Apologies.
Thanks so much, Caroline and Stephanie. I think your dog wants to join in, Stephanie. Thank you.
Keeping my fingers crossed there, she'd stay quiet.
They always start,
Yeah.
so they do. Does anyone have any questions for Caroline and Stephanie?
Hey, Lisa.
Yeah, I can, Siobhan, yeah.
Both of the presentations were fantastic, and delighted that for the participants of Kaleidoscope that their own self-worth and individuality and ability to contribute was validated through the course. Was confidence and lack of belief that you'd be accepted back into the workforce a really big factor for both of you? And would you credit Kaleidoscope with giving you the confidence to actually pursue those opportunities that you might not otherwise have pursued? And for me as an employer, what can I do to make the vacancies that we have or the opportunities we have more attractive to a carer who, may have lost their confidence?
For me, confidence was a huge issue. This time last year, I would not have envisaged myself giving a speak to people on Zoom. There's no way. But I find that I was more open, and when I went for my interview, I was honest and I said, look, this is my position, but I can work around it. I know if something pops up in the morning and I can't go into work, I will work that time up. And I think maybe employers need to know that, need to realize that we're honest people, we're trustworthy. Personally, I have years of experience. And I'm not, if I don't, my word is my oath.
And congratulations, it was a fantastic presentation. Delighted that you're where you want to be. It's really heartwarming.
For me, I suppose, because I'm a bit older, I was just saying, gosh, you hear things about the older person going for a job and all that, but I'm now working 13 hours a week, which slots in with my daughter. And it also gives me a little bit of time, because I've decided I don't want to be flying around. I wanted to enjoy it, but I want to work at the same time. And I really love it. I can't wait to get back in tomorrow. I'm learning, it's completely new. I'm meeting people, I'm meeting participants, I'm dealing with them. And it's completely different to me, the terminology. And I've no hesitation in saying on the phone, I'm very sorry, I'm only new. Can I take your number or your email address and I'll get back to you? And everybody's, oh, that's no problem at all. Just being honest.
Yeah, I have to agree with Stephanie as well, that, confidence is, I suppose, a huge issue for probably most of the participants on the course. I've been out of work for 12 years and felt, I'd never actually used the degree, I suppose, that I got. And I nearly felt, oh my God, by the time I go back to work, my degree, like, will be out of date, and, you know, I won't be able to apply everything I learned in previous jobs. And I think for me, Kaleidoscope, number one, gave me the confidence to go forward and, you know, look for a job that was going to suit me and something I wanted to do. But also it really highlighted the skills that, you know, you build up over the time being a carer. So I kind of felt I had this big gap on my CV for, you know, for all the time that I was caring for my daughter. And in fact, during all those nearly 10 years now, I had built up so many other skills that I hadn't really identified. That it was brilliant to be able to put that on my CV and to be able to talk about that in my interview with Care Alliance. So I suppose those two things, and then just the resilience and the opportunity to work from home, obviously the flexibility that I can drop my children to school, I can be there for them at the time that my daughter needs me most, and I'm there to collect her from school, but I can also come and fulfill my job role at home. I like to think that I go above and beyond. If, like last night, myself and Lisa met for an hour just to make sure that everything was going to run smoothly for today. And because I'm able to access my computer from home, I'm able to do that. I have the support of my husband that can mind the kids while I logged on to do it, so they weren't annoying me. And yeah, it's just fantastic to be able to do that and to feel, you know, empowered to be able to be good at your job as well as your caring commitments.
Thanks, Caroline. I'm just going to quickly jump in and say something, and then I see Ger has raised her hand, so we'll come to you next, Ger. Siobhan, every single person that sits in front of me when we do the screening call for Kaleidoscope, so it's the lack of confidence, it's the common denominator. And to see people's journey, and it is a journey, it's over 12 weeks. It's about a change of mindset. So people come in very apologetic and saying, sure, who'd want to employ me? I've been X, Y, and Z, you know, amount of years out. We'd one lady in Kaleidoscope 3, which is just finished, and she has no formal education. And at the start of Kaleidoscope, she was saying, like, I don't even have any, you know, formal qualifications to back me up. And at the end of the 12 weeks, we ask everyone to present a back to work plan. It's just a 5-minute presentation. And at the very last session, she said, I'm mid-50s. She said, I've never felt as empowered as I feel after doing this 12 weeks. She said, I'm now doing an ICDL course, and I'm halfway through an SNA course. That's the route that I want to take. And she said, there's, without a shadow of a doubt, there's no way I would have had the confidence to do that before doing Kaleidoscope. So the journey, like, and you know, even some people will say at the end, even some people will say at the very end that they, you know, that they know they're not ready to get work quite, you know, yet, but they know what the obstacles are to them getting work. So they know what they need to work through in order for them to get a job. So yeah, just wanted to add that bit in. Jerry, you had a question?
Sorry, I'm just going to close the door here. It's a bit noisy. One sec.
Okay.
Sorry, apologies. No, I don't have a question. What I would love to say is congratulations to both Caroline and to Stephanie. I think to share your journey with us all this morning and with everybody else, you are amazing ambassadors for the program, and for, you know, and testament to the amazing work that's been done by Lisa and the team. And I think you should be out there telling your story a little bit more. I think, you know, if people will resonate with you, anyone that's been on their journey as a carer or in other similar situations that are now ready to go back to work and do a little bit for themselves. So I just want to say I applaud you all. Well done. And it's amazing to hear your story. So thank you for sharing it. Oh, one other thing, Caroline, you alluded to in the 10 years that you were caring for your daughter, like it's the other skills that you picked up as well. And they can be honed, and they should be actually read on your CV, because they're the soft skills that employers are looking for now today, and not everybody has them. So don't think that it's a waste of time being at home. Those 10 years were very, very crucial to what your CV looks like now. So yeah.
And absolutely, because and only for, I suppose, you know, working with my chosen life coach, and obviously through all the sessions that were presented during Kaleidoscope, I realized that, you know, I had obviously, you know, built up a lot of skills like resilience, time management skills, advocacy, but I'd also worked with my canine companion doing fundraising. So myself and my family raised €10,000 to get an assistance dog for my daughter. And, you know, that was just something, you know, that we were doing as a family, but, you know, that went on my CV as well. And, you know, it was all those little things that you just don't realize as a carer, you know, that you're building up all these skills, I suppose. So, yeah, but thank you very much.
Geraldine, I'd agree with that, because I think a lot of people were quite blown away when they were going through their CVs. And like Colette at the time was talking, well, you're doing this and you're doing that and you're sort of saying, my God, like even me, I'd never thought of putting that on my CV. And just going back to David's talk, was something else that just hit me was like, I was always ma'am. And I never sort of, when it hit me, I was a carer, I was at the cinema, brought my daughter to the cinema one Sunday a couple of years ago, and the guy just said to me, oh, do you want a carer's ticket? And I said, no, I'm not a carer, I'm her mother. And he says, no, you're her carer. And I just sort of, that was my light bulb moment, that I was a carer. You're just a ma, and you do it. You're sort of dealt the cards and you get on with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it just, when David said it, it just took me back to that Sunday. But look, thank you very much for your kind words, Geraldine.
Thanks a million, Caroline and Stephanie. We're going to move on, but if anyone does have any other questions for the two ladies, if you put it into the chat box, we'll try and ensure that it gets answered a little bit later on. I've heard Caroline's story and I've heard Stephanie's story so many times, but it still gives me the shivers. It's just, they're just, yeah, they are. I can see lovely stuff in the chat as well. They are inspirational women and they're amazing. And I seen them, you know, both at the start of Kaleidoscope with the lack of confidence and the, you know, maybe wanting to go in a different direction. And then I just seen them at the end and how they blossomed, and it's great. It's great to still be in contact with them and being able to meet with you once a month and see how things are going. And, you know, it's great. It just shows that you can build bonds and friendships over Zoom, which I didn't know was possible, but it is. And yeah, so what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to Karen if we can hear her. Karen, do you want to try again? You're still on mute, Karen. What Karen is going to try and dial in. Do you want to try and dial in, Karen? Yeah, okay. So if you just bear with us for a couple of minutes. The joys of technology.
Those lovely bonds over Zoom you were talking about, you know, unfortunately you do have to be able to hear people to have those, to develop those relationships.
Definitely do.
I'm very conscious as well that, sorry for interrupting folks, but I'm very conscious as well that we're all just slightly staring at Karen while she's panicking, trying to get things organized. So I really wanted to just sort of take the focus off a little bit if we can. Just there's nothing worse than going, oh no, I know it's me. I know it's me. And I'm just very quickly going to try and figure out and remember how a phone works because I can't remember.
Thanks for breaking the ice there, Zoe.
You just kind of have to, I think, sometimes. So apologies for just diving in there, but you know, I think sometimes it's important.
Oh, for sure. I think Karen's happy with you. Does anyone, while we're waiting on Karen, does anyone else have any comments about this morning that they want to bring or discuss? Karen, it's not your day. Absolutely not your day. She can't get through on the Irish or the English number. So what we might do, Karen, is we might ask you at a later date to record yourself, what you were going to say, and we can send it on to the participants today. Does that sound okay? Yeah, I think so. I think it's just not, technology is not going to work today. But listen, thank you so much, because Karen very kindly is in another country and you know, joined us today. Very, very decent of her. But what we will do is we will get her to record her presentation, and we can forward it on to people. And if they have any questions, then they can contact Karen. I think that's probably the best thing to do at this stage. So now we're going to break. We're a little bit ahead of ourselves. So we'll have about a 20-minute break. So we'll come back at 11:30. And we're going to come back with Zoe. Yes, yourself, Zoe. We're going to come back with you. So yeah, if everybody wants to come back at 11:30, and I'll introduce you then, Zoe. Is that okay? All right, enjoy the tea, coffee, Ferrero Rocher, biscuits, whatever takes your fancy. See you in a while.
Thanks, Lisa.
Karen Kiernan, from the CEO of One Family, who can be heard now, which is brilliant. So yeah, I contacted you, Karen. I saw a job that you had advertised. I know Caroline's Ireland works quite closely with One Family, and I'd seen a job that you had advertised that was very flexible. We had a bit of a chat about, you know, flexible working, and I'm delighted that you're able to present for us today. So I'd like to welcome you, and I'll hand the floor over to yourself now. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. And thank you everyone at Caroline's for your graciousness in dealing with my technical issues. It's much appreciated. I'm not in my home environment, so things have been going wrong. So look, I was delighted to get the invitation to speak, and I suppose I hadn't considered us in that light of being a carer-friendly, flexible employer. But once Lisa kind of had a chat with me, I realized, well, yes, we are. One Family is an organization that works to support one-parent families. So a lot of our work is services directly provided to parents and sometimes to their children. And then you've got all the normal back-end roles, I suppose, associated with an organization. And I suppose I had thought, well, actually, a lot of our roles are part-time because of funding. We just don't necessarily have enough funding to have a full-time role. But actually, part of it is we are very flexible. Once I thought about it, I was able to see that. So it's very interesting. So I thought today I'll just share some of what we offer and our approach, what works and doesn't work for us, and then a little bit about remote working. So yeah, we're a charity. We work in the same sector as yourselves, and we do some policy work with Caroline's, which is great. So our values are around being a family-friendly organization. And of course, because we support parents and we support people who are parenting alone or sharing parenting of their children, a lot of the challenges are exactly the same for people who are caring. In fact, many are the same people, because we know that there are more people, and it doesn't exactly translate, but we know that there are more one-parent families where, for example, a child or an adult has a disability. Sorry, did you lose me there? Am I back? Did I knock off audio there? I can't hear you now.
No, the camera just went there for a second, but we can still hear you there.
Great. Yeah, okay, thank you. Sorry. Yeah, so at a policy level, there are a lot more one-parent families where someone has a disability than two-parent families. And we know of many people parenting alone who may be caring for a child with additional needs, but may also be caring for vulnerable or elderly parents. So there's a huge overlap, in fact, and there's a lot of similarities. Really interesting listening to the participants and people who worked on your Kaleidoscope program. It really reminds me of our New Futures employability program, and self-confidence, self-esteem, being able to understand those soft skills, all of that is really relevant. So it's very interesting. So I suppose to put the employer hat back on, there are roles where we can be flexible and there are roles where we cannot. So our most important thing are our service users. They are starting to come back in and out of our building. We need receptionists there to answer the door, answer the phone, let them in. So those roles are much more difficult to be flexible about than perhaps an admin role or a policy role where perhaps they just need to attend certain meetings, but they could work at other times. So we do what we can, and we really try and respond at an individual level to what people need. And we have a disproportionate amount, I suppose, of people who are parenting alone working for us because they're interested in the issues. So we do our best to support them, but to support anybody who may have different flexibilities. And it's also interesting, the conversation we're having about the hours for carers, because we have similar issue with WFP and hours, and trying to make sure that people can have part-time working and maximize their income through other supports as well. But anyway, so kind of before COVID, if we go back, we were able to offer flexibility where possible in a number of different ways. So sometimes people would occasionally, or they might have a scheduled day of working from home. We had one person who lives in Northern Ireland, and we enabled her to work on her commute. So she actually did a huge amount of email and documentation work on her bus journey to and from the office every day, which was kind of an innovative one. We have toil, time off in lieu. We can, where possible, do annual leave at short notice, if that allows people to cope with whatever is going on for them. And we also have compassionate leave. And then, as is statutorily required, parental leave, paternity leave, force majeure, all of those kinds of things. But we're very aware of them, I suppose, and we tell the staff about them. And we try and make sure that people can get the leave that they need or that they're entitled to. Now, in order to make that work, and I suppose what that is, what we're talking mostly about here are hours of work, so the number of hours in totality for a role, and then also when they might be worked. And to be able to do that, as I said, it's job dependent, but it also is dependent on being very clear and assertive in communication from both sides around expectations. Because I suppose we have had instances where it hasn't worked, where somebody was allowed, say, work one day a week to care for a parent. And it became clear to me that they weren't actually doing any work. And once that happens, the trust is broken, and it's very hard to come back from that. So it is very important for everyone to be clear about expectations. And I think you referenced it earlier, Caroline, in terms of, and Stephanie, in terms of being trustworthy, doing the job. That's the vast majority of people. But where it goes wrong, it can go badly wrong, and then that can make employers nervous. So I suppose we have very good news stories, but we've also had the other side as well. So I suppose it's being clear about what's an essential meeting, what can you not miss? What are we all prepared to be flexible about? And we really want a two-way street. So we'll be flexible where we can, where it doesn't matter whether you're working 9 to 3 this day, but actually we really need you at that meeting at 4 o'clock. So how are we going to make that work? And then what outputs may be needed as well within a certain time period. We have 2 helplines and, as I said, a reception service. So they just can't have the same flexibility as others. Now they can in terms of location. And obviously COVID has revolutionized how we all work, but they can't in terms of they have to have someone on them. They have to have people working. So unless it's well scheduled in advance, and what we try and do is build in backup systems so that people can be flexible, but that can cost more money. There's always an advantage. So as I said, we have a lot of part-time roles. It's not necessarily deliberately. Some roles you wouldn't, for example, cancel 5 days a week, but you might cancel 3 days a week, or you might cancel 3 days a week and manage 2 days a week. And then some of it is down to funding and just having part-time. But we have a lot of parents, and we've had at least one person go on formal carers leave, and that was a really interesting process in terms of dividing the job, having someone fill in for a couple of years. She kept one part of her job. It was a good learning for everybody, and it worked really well. And she's back in a full-time role with us. So, it worked. So in terms of COVID and the pandemic, look, like a lot of organizations, overnight, we turned into a remotely working organization. All the services, including even childcare to some degree, moved to an online or telephone provision. So everyone, the vast majority of people went out into their homes and to deliver those services. And it was incredibly successful, and the staff were brilliant, and they stepped up and they delivered. And now we're trying to get some of them back into the office part-time. And we kept a core team stayed in, a core team of admin people stayed in. And that was essential, because one of the real difficulties in people working remotely was the ICT requirements. And that none of us could have known what was needed, but even 6 months into it, we were realizing, oh, we need to go again here. We need to upgrade what people have. We need to look at the cybersecurity again. We need to keep retraining. So there's a lot of time and money and resources that are now going into IT that wasn't before COVID. And that'll probably continue because, of course, we've had the HSE hack in the meantime. But that's something that costs money, and there's a skill shortage in that area, and we're really having to scramble to learn. And in some ways, it's easier if people are in the building. But you know, we are where we are, and we'll make it work in terms of facilitating both the services and people's working on a hybrid basis. And that's what we're looking at for this year, is that services will continue to be delivered on a hybrid basis, other than those for children, which have to be in the building. And then people can work on a hybrid basis. So some people, they want to be entirely in, some people, they want to be entirely home, but we're going to try and get everybody in for a little bit, just to see what that's like. So that's, I suppose, one of the additional costs that maybe we didn't anticipate. And I'm assuming if we go to hybrid working in a more structured way, there will also be additional costs for us. And as a small charity, that needs to be borne somewhere. So I suppose that is part of the issue for an employer, is there's new systems required, there's new back-end skills required, there's additional funding required to make it work. But what we can generate is a very committed, very skilled, flexible workforce who really have the needs of the organization and the service user at the heart of what they do. And that you can't pay for, you know. And it reminds me earlier when you were talking about recruitment and soft skills, I would rather hire somebody who isn't as technically qualified for a role, but has the right approach to work, than the other way around, because you can train somebody, but you can't train those soft skills, the approach, the commitment, the flexibility. Those things are invaluable as an employer, I would say. So in 2014, I went on a study visit to the States. It was looking at women in work. And one of the things that they were doing in some companies, their government agencies and private companies, was remote working. And this was to facilitate women, i.e. mothers, to work. And they saw great benefits financially to the company, but also then to the parents who were involved. So that was interesting. And then obviously that has just changed hugely since COVID. So I'll just finish. I think we need to treat people like adults, and we need to trust them and have very clear, honest conversations with them about expectations in terms of remote working or flexible hours. And people need to step up to that. And if there's something there's a problem, they need to talk to their employers about it, and the employer needs to trust that that will be okay. And it's a little bit like management, I think, is a little bit like parenting. So you kind of want to create an environment where people can make as many decisions for themselves as they can. They can be autonomous as much as possible, but within a framework of safety and accountability. I think that's a key to enabling and empowering people to do a good job, whether it's in your office full time, or whether it's part time, or whether it's working from their home. And thinking about this, I remembered a few years ago, I used to care for my nana every Wednesday. And I would go to her house and work and have my laptop and do emails and work. And it actually gave me great time to think and reflect, because I wasn't in the busy office. And I forgot, and I did that probably for 3 years. And it was it was a real privilege for me to be able to do that, both for her and in terms of my relationship with her, but also being able to run an organization and do that. So I'll leave it there, and I hope I haven't gone over time, because Zoe has graciously given me some of her time. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Karen. That's brilliant. Does anyone have any questions for Karen? No, I think we're all good, Karen. Listen, really appreciate you moving your time around, and delighted that we could get you to present in the end. It's really interesting to hear from an employer's point of view, I think, about, you know, and an honest account of from an employer's point of view of where maybe it didn't work. I would totally agree with you. I think when you work in a very fast-paced organization, it's generally quite easy to see when someone is not doing their work, if it's a small organization, because, you know, by nature, you know when things aren't getting done. But I would totally agree with you about, communication and being honest and open about what works for you as an organisation, and to try and be flexible about that. So thanks a million. Really appreciate you coming today. We're going to move on now. If anybody does have any questions for Karen, again, you can put them in the chat box and we can forward them on to her. But now we're going to move on to Zoe. Zoe is our Senior Policy and Research Officer at Carolines Ireland and has worked quite closely with Caroline and I on Kaleidoscope. She's collected 3 sets of data from cohorts 1 to 2 at the moment. She will be collecting some on cohort 3, and really looking forward to hearing about the statistics behind the impact of Kaleidoscope. So thanks very much, Zoe.
No problem. And just before anybody's heart sinks when they hear statistics, I'm going to keep it as light as I can, because there's nothing worse than hearing, oh, is a policy and research officer talking about statistics. You're just like, oh no. But what I really want to do is focus on the kind of the impact and the evaluation piece that we did around Kaleidoscope, and then what it would mean for carers, but also for employers. So let me just, so why did we decide to evaluate Kaleidoscope? You've gotten a good idea of what Kaleidoscope is in the last couple of hours. So why evaluate it? Well, it was a funding requirement. We got funding for this program from Dormant Accounts funds. The required evaluation is relatively basic, and it's kind of outputs focused, but less so in recent rounds. We've kind of worked with Dormant Accounts and other funding bodies to get moving from outputs, so looking just at numbers and how many people got back to employment, to looking at more at outcomes, going, what did people get out of it? How can they build upon this in the future? So we also wanted to ensure effectiveness. So as you'll be aware, there were 3 what we call cohorts of students who took on this course, and we were able to, between the cohorts, we were able to look at the evaluation that we'd gotten back from people, and we were able to make some changes to make it a little bit better for the next one and then for the next one. So it's kind of always about making sure that we can make changes and react to what family carers themselves are telling us that they need. And as an organization, we have a dedication to evidence-based interventions rather than just sort of saying that looks really good. We want to make sure that we're actually doing something that's evidence-based, that has a real kind of solid base underneath it to then build upon. And also it's to enable future work. As Liam said in his opening address, we are hoping to get funding to continue this, or to see this program live on in some way after this current round of funding is over. And so all the bits of evidence and everything, if we can show that it's actually quite impactful for family carers and for employers and for everybody involved, then that means, you know, that's a bit more likely. So what did we evaluate? So there was 3 main kind of chunks of information that I took in that we evaluated. The first one was around your demographics. That's your basic age, gender, location, how long people have been caring, how long they've been out of the workforce, what their previous qualifications were, things like that. So we have all that information at our hand. We then, this is the nerdy part, this is the bit where I get excited. So we looked at scales, looking at various things like loneliness, like quality of life, like psychological well-being. And so we looked at the kind of those questions, those scales as they're known, that have been well tested, that are well regarded, that have a really solid evidence base underneath them. So then we could be confident in what they were telling us was actually meaningful, that we weren't just kind of making up things from our heads, that there was a kind of a process behind knowing that these were really, really solid bits of information that would be very useful. So like I said, there's a couple of them there, and I will talk a little bit about some of the individual questions as we go on through the presentation. And then the third part was looking at work readiness. So looking at people's knowledge of their employment opportunities, their feelings of readiness to rejoin or join the paid workforce, and where they were at different times throughout their journey on the Kaleidoscope project. So what was the timeline then? So just to give you an idea of what we did and when we did it. So the idea around this evaluation that we did was that there are 3 time points throughout the kind of journey of somebody taking on Kaleidoscope and moving through the program. And they're very imaginatively called T1, which is time point 1. Us researchers were not necessarily known for our creativity a lot of the time, unfortunately. So T1 was immediately prior to starting the course. So right after they were accepted onto the course, I sent out a survey, this survey that I'll show you in a second. And so that was to look at where they were at as they were starting. So where all the family carers, the students were at as they were about to start the course. So before anything else had been done, that kind of gave us what's known as a baseline. Then they did the Kaleidoscope course. So they didn't hear from me for 12 weeks. So that was all of the teaching, all of the course, everything like that, all of the extra supports, that all took place in between T1 and, again, T2. The imagination is astounding. And that took place, I sent that, the same questions were all sent out at each time point. So it was the exact same questions over 3 different time points. So time 2 was within 1 week approximately of finishing the course. Sometimes it did stretch to 2 weeks, but it was always within that immediately after finishing the course. And then time 3 is 3 months post completion. So that's 3 months after their graduation point. Sent out the exact same questions again. And the idea of doing this evaluation over those 3 time points was really to see where they started, where they ended up, and what happened in the middle. And so for a lot of courses, and I've used this methodology a few times, is that, you know, you can see where people are at before they get some sort of an intervention, and then you do the intervention or a course or whatever it might be, and then usually there's a big jump in people's happiness, you know, quality of life, their knowledge of various topics immediately after finishing, because, well, you've just finished it. You've just done 12 intensive weeks of this particular thing. So of course, you know, you're going to have improved your scores, if you know what I mean, in lots of those things. But very often there's quite a steep drop off then. As you can imagine, you finished, you're not going in every week, you're not doing the course every week, you're not reading stuff every week. So 3 months later, after you've finished a course, you can kind of, you've forgotten stuff, or, you know, the good stuff was kind of maybe worn off because it's like life gets in the way, life kind of impacts again, you're back to caring. Well, you never really stop to do the course. It's not that kind of course, but, you know, that kind of life gets back up in the way. So that was really to see, do we have this kind of a journey on people's happiness and people's quality of life, people's knowledge of the workforce, or does it keep going? I'm building the tension here to when we actually look at the numbers, by the way. That's my attempt to do that. No spoilers here. So looking then at the format, so what did the actual survey look like? So we used Google Forms. The reason we did that rather than something like SurveyMonkey is, while it's important that it's free, that's always useful, but it's actually quite a rigorous and really solid suite of tools that you can use to do evaluations over time. And it's actually more secure than other survey instruments. So we've switched, as an organization, we made that decision to switch to something that was a bit more secure, considering that we're dealing with people's, you know, quite personal information. It was really important that we were secure. And so all of this is done under my login. It's kept private. Only I have access to the individual responses. Everything that is shared, if it's shared, the numbers, things like that, it's done completely anonymously. I'm the only person who can actually trace back if needed and see what an individual said or what their individual scores was. And that was really important, that we made sure that that was kept as private as possible. With Google Forms, you can download data in Excel and other formats. So if that's your bag, you can just download all of the spreadsheets, which I have done. I drown in spreadsheets and different tabs. It's all very exciting. But you can also export ready-made graphs. So if you go in, you can literally just copy and paste your graph and it's all ready to go there for you. So it's just a useful tool that if people aren't using, I said I just highlighted here when I had a couple of minutes to do that. So who are we talking about here? So most of the participants in cohorts 1 and 2, which is what I'm primarily talking about here, as Lisa said, were mostly female. We had a couple of men, but that was about it. That sounded very scathing. That was about it. I don't mean it like that. The average age of participants was 46. And then the spread of participants, the youngest was aged 30 within those two cohorts, and the eldest was 61. So you've got quite a big spread of kind of working age from quite young to maybe more towards retirement age, perhaps. The average age was 46. There was a real mix of rural and urban. So there was nothing really that stood out necessarily by nature of the population. There was probably more from the Dublin area, but there was a good spread of urban and rural. And a really broad mix of people coming into the course with a broad mix of education and training. So you had some folks who had maybe left school after the intercert or the junior cert or whatever it might be. And then you had some participants that had master's degrees. So you could see there, it just kind of highlights a little bit more of that, where caring is a kind of a cross-cutting thing. Anybody can become a carer, and it's very likely you'll either become a carer or it'd be in need of care at some point in your life. So I think that was really important to note, that there's a real broad mix of people with experience, both formal education, but then also training in the trades, all that kind of stuff as well. The longest period of time that people on the course in cohort 1 and 2 had been away from employment was 25 years. That was the longest that people had been out of the paid workforce. Quite a number of participants had actually been working up until March 2020. And then their particular roles, given that they were maybe part-time or were made redundant, or didn't continue on after COVID sort of hit, I suppose. So now I'm going to go through a couple of graphs and a few of the questions. I don't want to go through every single question. There was about 30 questions, I think. Maybe it was less than that. Maybe 20 questions throughout time. So I'm not going to go through every single one. I'm just going to highlight a couple here that I thought would be interesting. So this is a tool known as Cantrill's ladder. And so the idea behind this is that you imagine a ladder with steps numbered from 0 at the bottom to 10 at the very, very top. And you ask people to say, okay, well, 0 is the worst possible life you could ever imagine, and 10 is the absolute best life you could ever imagine. Whereabouts do you put your life and your experiences and how you're feeling right now? And so we asked people to do that at those 3 different time points that I highlighted earlier. And the important thing I wanted to point out here is that this graph keeps going up over time, which is really, really, really great. So the average score, so we averaged out people's score from 0 to 10. So the average score was about just over 5 before they started the course. It moved up to over 5 after they finished the course. But then what was really interesting to me was that it kept going after the course. So people even built on what they had learned in the course and their experience over the course over the following 3 months. So it's kind of like an exponential growth. Well, it's probably not exponential, but it's an additional growth that happens over time. So that's this is the trend we want to see in all of these graphs that I'm going to show you. And that's a really positive thing. But that didn't happen in all of them. So that's Cantrill's ladder. So that really just kind of people, how they're feeling about their life, they're feeling better about it over time, basically. We also asked people to, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, how would you describe your current opportunities for employment? And you can see then, before they started the course, the current opportunities that people saw were pretty low. They were under 5, but then that grew to 6 when they had just finished. And again, it grew again by a small number at the final point 3 months after they finish. So people were able to identify more opportunities for employment over time. And that's really important to note, is that sometimes it's just about how people view their opportunities can also really help. It's not just about the actual opportunities, but how they view them. Because over time, 3 months, 6 months probably is about the period of each one of these cohorts, from start to 3 months after they finished up. 6 months isn't a huge time for there to be massively different actual employment opportunities available to them, except it's their perception of it, which I think is really important to note. Moving on to the employment knowledge and skills then. So again, this kind of, it goes up and it goes up and then it peaks. but it still goes up. So that's kind of what I'm always looking for around rating your current employment knowledge and employment skills. So this is looking at knowledge and skills that people have said that they have themselves. Again, it was just over 5 before they started the course, but then you can see it jumped up to over 7 when they just finished, and it's around about the same point 3 months later. So people's understanding of the knowledge and skills that they bring to the workforce is so much greater than when they started, when they finish. And that goes down to what, you know, Stephanie and Caroline were talking about, how they were able to kind of go, yeah, those soft skills that I have that I've developed over caring, they are really important and they will help me in employment. And that then adds to their confidence, which I'll speak about in a few minutes. There were some other questions that we asked as well, and these related to their kind of, you know, social feelings around isolation, around satisfaction, and socialization. And why these aren't directly related to employment per se, I just think it's very interesting to note that with these charts, you want the dark color to go down and you want the lighter colors to go up, because the dark color in this particular chart that I'm showing here is that people are often feel isolated from others. So over time, you can see that that goes down. So they're feeling less isolated. And the people who said that they never feel isolated from others is going up. And so being part of a group, being part of this, this program helps to alleviate those feelings of isolation that family carers often feel, and that's quite prevalent in other research that's been done, is that isolation feelings for family carers can be quite intensive. This was, I wanted to highlight that not everything went up or down the way we wanted them to. And this was a question around personal help. So, you know, we asked people to say, you know, on a kind of a 1 to 5, yes, I have someone, or no, I don't. Do you have sorry, this was actually 1 to 10. So do you have someone to turn to for suggestions about how to deal with a personal problem? And they stayed pretty darn level. And that kind of makes sense, because, you know, this was an employment-based and a personal confidence-based building program. It wasn't necessarily built to make sure that people could find more personal help. So I just thought that was an interesting one to put in there, is that some things, you know, not everything is about, you know, can be addressed by building confidence. Sometimes there are just practical things that people just don't have access to when they're a family carer. This one, however, you know, identifying someone to help you with daily chores if you were sick does go up. So, and I'm not entirely sure why this is the case. We're going to have to do a little bit more work on this. It may be the fact that people are a bit more confident in asking for help to do their daily chores if somebody was sick, and have that confidence to say, hey, you know what, I need help here. So again, we're not entirely sure why that's the case, but I just thought it was an interesting one to highlight. This one is around self-satisfaction. So on the whole, I'm satisfied with myself. So again, what you want here is you want the blues to kind of get more, and you want the greens and the purples to go down. And you can see that that's exactly what happened. And this is the numbers of people who said, yes, I am either the dark blue is strongly agree that I am satisfied with myself. The lighter blue is that I agree. The kind of green is disagree, and the purple is strongly disagree. So you can see then that that's, you know, it's all trending in the right direction, I suppose, saying that people are more satisfied with themselves over the time of doing this particular program. We also asked, what are the factors affecting your employment opportunities? And what I've done here is I've just created a word cloud. And the bigger the word is here in this word cloud, the more it was mentioned by people answering this question. So you can see here, and it's a theme that you will have noted throughout the last few presentations and the few discussions. Confidence was the big one. Time was another big one. Hours and caring. I suppose those are the big ones really that jump out at you from this. So I think for an employer, I think it's really important to note that this is what family carers see as the barriers or the factors that affect your employment opportunities. So, and this is over all three times. So I just kind of copied and pasted and put it in to this word cloud. So you can see that its confidence is mentioned so much more than other things. So keeping that in mind, confidence and time and the hours of being working is really something that affects the opportunities as family carers themselves perceive them. So key takeaways. I've been trying to keep it moving because I know I'm slightly over time, so I do apologize. Some of the key takeaways here, I always like having key takeaways in threes. So key takeaway is that carers want to work. I think that's very clear. Not all carers will want to work. Not all carers want to go back into employment or to be part of the employment, and that's absolutely fine too. But many carers really, really want to work and want to make that happen. Confidence is absolutely key. That's the big thing that I think employers in particular need to be aware of, is that you know, if you've been away from employment for a long time, your confidence can be very much shaken. But that doesn't mean that can't be alleviated or that can't be worked upon, or that having employment itself can be a builder to confidence, which will then keep going within the workplace. And the last part is when the positive impacts of the Kaleidoscope program, they keep going over time. So like I said, you can just remember that the kind of the bar charts keep going up from time 1, 2, 3. And so that's kind of, it keeps going, and that's really quite unusual. I've never really seen something that stark before when I've done any of these types of, you know, intervention evaluations over time. Very often there's quite a dip afterwards for various various different things. So it kind of goes, you're here at your baseline, then you go, yeah, everything's brilliant, everything's fantastic at you know, when you've just finished the course, but then it peters out quite quickly. But that just simply hasn't happened here, and I think that's a testament to the program that Lisa has put together, and Caroline and everybody else who's been involved in that part of it. I wasn't involved in that at all. I come in at the end with the numbers and the you know, the discussion and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of my buzz. So I think that's a real testament to that. And I just think it's something worth knowing as the program goes ahead. And I believe this is just a quote that I wanted to finish on. And I'm going to read it out for maybe anybody who's not able to see my slides. So this is a quote from a family carer who took part in the program. I don't know who it is, actually. I just read it, and I thought it was very important to show you guys. So, being a full-time carer to an adult child with profound special needs, as well as carence allowance restrictions in terms of pay and hours, makes it very difficult to figure out how to gain employment without support of employers. This is not due to lack of skills or training. If you go for an interview with all of these rules attached, i.e. you cannot earn more than a certain amount, or you cannot work more than 18.5 hours, an unaware employer is not going to consider you for the job. This course is the first time I have felt that there is hope that this can be overcome. So I think there's something in there for everybody who's at today's seminar, whether you're an employer or a recruitment officer, whether you're a family carer, whether you're working in policy. I think there's something to take away in this quote for everybody here. So that's why I wanted to finish up on that. And thank you very much for your attentiveness.
Thank you very much, Zoe. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask Zoe about the presentation?
Can I just point out, thank you very much, Zoe, and to everyone who came before, like Karen, and of course also Caroline and Stephanie. But what Zoe has just shown is actually really unusual. I've been a trainer and educator since about 2002. And every time when I do a training course, I always try to insist with organizations that they also do not only an evaluation immediately at the end of the program, but also 3 months or possibly even 6 months later. The fact that 3 months later, you still have people's confidence and sort of happiness and belief that they can get into good employment, that this is still going up, is absolutely amazing, because most of the times you see the dip pretty much immediately afterwards. If the bosses or the supervisors or managers are not constantly proactively working with the people. Very well done, excellent, very, very good feedback. And it only shows how good a program this is, Lisa and Caroline and Liam and everybody else.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Vera.
Vera. Thanks very much. Does anyone else have any? Oh,
We
sorry.
did. No. I'm just saying we would have loved to have done 6 months, just to see, but unfortunately, just the timing. It's quite a time limited project, and being able to put those resources towards it just wasn't possible in this case. Hence the 3 months. So I always like to put that proviso in as a little researcher, going, yeah, no, I would have liked to have done 6 months, but
Thanks very much, Zoe. Liam, did you want to say something?
Thanks, Lisa, and thank you, Vera, for the objective, independent observations. Like, we're delighted with the impact and the feedback, and with the second cohort, Zoe, that I'm aware of, it's similar data we're finding, similar.
Well, that is, sorry, just to be clear, that all that data was from cohorts 1 and 2.
Okay.
Yes, it is. I combined them. Sorry if I didn't. I apologize if I didn't make that clear. Yes, so that's from both the first 2 cohorts. Obviously, cohort 3 has just finished, and I didn't want to muddy the waters by putting in some of the data from cohort 3, but not the 3 months. So that's why it's kept at that.
That's hot off the press then, because I know those with the research background will know sometimes the early adopters are the ones that, the people who take part in the first group are the most enthusiastic, are the ones that benefit most. But what you're saying, Zoe, is the second group who began their course in, when was it, September, had report equally, largely equally benefits, which is.
There was, honestly, looking at them separately without combining them, you could barely tell the difference between the numbers. They were pretty much the exact same. Obviously some differences because there's just different people, but in general I was kind of struck looking at the numbers side by side, going, wow, there's really not much in it.
And I know Sharon is here from the department, and they're keen to look at evidence-informed interventions, and so I think with increasing confidence we can say it's not just a statistical anomaly, that it is consistent. And I would invite your own stats team in the department to look at the data. We'll provide access to the raw data, because if we are
anonymized, just to be very clear,
anonymized,
I always have to say that, just make sure everybody knows,
to add a level of objectivity to it, and it really is that, alongside the kind of, it's about a 30 or 40% progression into paid employment, which is another objective, not the only one. I think it really is. And look, it highlights the good funding that this project has, and I know sometimes, and Karen might still be there, but I know sometimes the more ongoing projects don't have that level of unit funding, but I do think we could bring down the unit cost significantly enough so that it would be deemed to be really good value as well as impactful. So I think we've a bit of work to do with your own department, Sharon, and the whole range of people interested in that kind of job activation work. So we look forward to doing that into the future. Thanks, Zoe. Sharon, I don't know if there's something you want to say. I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but don't get many opportunities to.
You get lots of opportunities to put me on the spot, Liam. No, I just want to say, just in general this morning, that it's been really, really interesting. I found all the presentations just really fascinating, and as I said, just very interesting. And yeah, just to say, Zoe, yeah, certainly, I can't claim to be any kind of an expert looking over stats, but we do have people in the department that can do that. So any kind of, yeah, absolutely, any kind of anonymized data or whatever that you can share would certainly be very, very interesting. Yeah, so thank you. Thanks to everybody.
Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon. Liam, your hand is still raised. You're okay now, are you? Great. Zoe, thanks a million for your presentation. It is both engaging and entertaining at the same time, and you managed to make stats very interesting, which is which is a win. Thanks. No, it's brilliant. It's brilliant to I think to see that, because we get feedback from the participants, but it's great to actually see it, I suppose, there in black and white, that the effects have been sustained. So thanks very much. We really do appreciate the work you do for us. Just to say that we're all about sustainability in Kaleidoscope as well. So our funding is due to run out at the end of June. So with that in mind, we host virtual coffee mornings every month with cohorts 1 to 3 to encourage peer support. We also have planned a reunion lunch in June with a live link for people who can't make it. And we're going to have a coach working with cohorts 1 to 3 about planning for the future and how they can support themselves beyond Kaleidoscope. So we're very much about people supporting themselves within the peer group, and that there isn't a dependence on Kaleidoscope going into the future. So thanks, Zoe. And last but by no means least, we have Fiona O'Neill. Fiona is the founder of Job for Family Carers. We work very closely with Fiona, and she also presents on the Kaleidoscope course. So Fiona, yeah, I'm going to hand over to you. Thanks very much.
Can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
Well, excellent. I'm one of the other people who's had technical difficulties this morning, so I'm tuning in through the phone at the moment. So I'm delighted, Zoe, you read out that quote, because I couldn't see the slides, so I'm here listening the whole time. So the quote was so powerful at the end, and it really, really summarises everything that we're talking about this morning, whether it comes from an employer's perspective, from a family carer's perspective, from a government's perspective. It just summarised it brilliantly. So I'm delighted you read it out, because I couldn't see it on your screen. So thank you very much. For those of you, some of you might have been in contact with us already, Jobs for Family Carers. I think, Caroline, you're going to be my eyes in the sky. You're going to have my presentation up on screen there, because I'll be looking at my presentation this side.
Absolutely. You just tell me when you want me to move it on.
I will indeed. Brilliant. So Lisa has just said there that Jobs for Family Carers is a social enterprise, and we collaborate with Care Alliance and Kaleidoscope, because it is that part of the journey where, now that family carers have, received all this support, their CV building, their training, their one-to-one coaching, their confidence building, now it's actually time to try and find that job. So it's that stage in the process to be able to move forward. So exactly what Lisa was just saying, there is life after Kaleidoscope, and it's actually now starting to, get in contact with employers. I suppose my own journey is what instigated the founding of Jobs for Family Carers. Caroline, if you pop on just onto the next slide there from the About Me. You can't see me on screen right now, so there's a photograph of me and my two boys. So in Ireland, a carer is defined as someone looking after a person who needs support because of age, disability or illness, including mental illness. As a carer, you cannot engage in employment, training or education courses outside of the home for more than 18.5 hours a week. Now, that was a huge piece and it still is a huge piece when it comes to family carers, is that 18.5 hour limit, and that stipulation is set in writing by the government. So like I said, it was through my own journey. As it says there, I'm proud to say I'm a family carer myself. So my son lives with a number of different conditions. He's rheumatoid arthritis, scoliosis, sight loss. So the level of care he requires means that even if I wanted to, I cannot work full time. So I decided I wanted to help people in a similar situation to me. So literally, I remember the day so well. So back in 2019, and it was an advertisement on the radio for a job. It was 15 hours. And in my head, I went, oh my God, that would be fantastic for a family care, 15 hours. And then I realized you never hear of jobs which are 15 or 16 hours. There's so few and far between. And that's when the seed was planted of Jobs for Family Carers, to try and find those jobs that matched that criteria of the 18.5 hours for family carers. So I started to kind of do my own bit of research. I'd find a job in Cork, which was 17 hours, and I'd send it to people I knew in Cork, family carers in Cork, Waterford, Kilkenny, Dublin. So I was starting to find all these jobs. And then I went, do you know what? I'll actually just bring all these jobs into one place, so that family carers across Ireland will know that this is the place to come to find jobs that matched their hourly criteria. And that's where Jobs for Family Carers was born. Thousands of family carers then actually started to get on board with this, to kind of say, well, now we know where to go. One of so you talked about that word cloud there, was time was a big thing for family carers. Not having the time to sit and for maybe 1 or 2 hours every night to go through different job vacancy websites and things like that. So they knew that Jobs for Family Carers was the place to come to, that they were doing all that research for them. So it started from there, and it has only grown since. So that's kind of where jobs from family carers has grown from. Caroline, if you pop onto the next slide, you should see these are our three audience, we'll say. So employers, being people like yourselves, so Jobs for Family Carers is for employers based in the Republic of Ireland who need to fill vacancies with skilled staff. So our specialised recruitment solutions provide readily available talented people free of charge, unlike traditional recruitment methods. And I suppose as an employer for yourselves, that is what's different, I suppose, with Jobs for Family Carers, is other traditional recruitment methods. They either maybe charge a percentage based on the salary of the person that's getting their placement, or they charge an amount based on just the service itself, so the placement itself, if a placement is filled. Whereas Jobs for Family Carers, it's a free of charge service. So it's for you to actually come to Jobs for Family Carers and advertise your vacancies, those part-time vacancies with us. And then they can then be in turn shared with family carers in your own locality. So if you have a business in Waterford, the national business, whatever it may be, that we would share them with family carers in that area for them to then in turn get in contact with you and apply for those jobs. So like I said, from an employer's perspective, the family carer then again, so it's Jobs for Family Carers is for family carers, the Republic of Ireland, who are looking for part-time employment around their caring commitments. Again, our specialised solutions provide employment opportunities, support and advocacy. Unlike traditional agencies, our solutions meet that 18.5-hour per week employment requirement. What we've found over time is that there's so many employers that didn't know about the 18.5-hour requirement. But sometimes when a job is being advertised as part-time, it's usually maybe 18.5 hours is the CE scheme. Sometimes it's on average about 21, 24 hours as defined as part-time. Employers didn't know that there were these thousands and thousands of people in Ireland that can only work 18.5. So there was actually this cohort of people in Ireland, skilled professionals, that weren't being included in a resource pool to be available to employers. So when I contact, so like I said, Jobs for Family Carers, when it talks about advocacy there in that sentence, we contact employers to be able to tell them, do you know what, we have these people that are on our books here, that, you know, all these qualifications. There could be an accountant, a teacher who's had to give up work, a marketing executive. But we'll say if an employer has a job that is advertised at 24 hours per week, to have that conversation with the employer to say, do you know what, if a family carer with the professionalism, the qualifications, the passion that you need on your team was to apply for this job, and they scored, you know, quite highly in your interview process, would there be room to reduce maybe that 21 hours or 24 hours to the 18.5 hours to allow them the opportunity? Now, what we're not asking family carers to get any, you know, they're not coming in through a back door. They're following the exact same recruitment process as everyone else that applies, but it's just that flexibility on the hours. So they still would have the same score rating in the interview, but if they were the ones that scored high in the interview based on what happens, whether, like I said, when they're delivering their own piece, or whether it's their qualifications, that 18.5 hours maybe is something that we could meet halfway on. But like I said, employers never knew of that, and a lot of employers didn't. So I suppose Jobs for Family Carers, one of our pieces is not only just about finding those jobs for family carers, but educating employers about these 18.5 hours as well. It's not even 18.5 hours, I keep saying part-time, but even what a lot of employers now are starting to look at is that if there's a full-time role that they're finding it very hard to fill, about the possibility of taking on 2 family carers and having 2 18.5-hour contracts to fill that one whole-time equivalent. So there's different ways of working around this. So like I said, there's a number of different ways Jobs for Family Carers is helping the family carer themselves and the employer. And then the third, our third beneficiary, we'll say, is the family care charities. So Jobs for Family Carers is for charities and service providers who help family carers to re-enter the world of work. So our specialised recruitment solutions provide partnership opportunities to help their family carers secure employment, enabling the charity themselves to achieve key objectives and reduce costs. Because again, it doesn't matter whether it's a charity, whether it's a business, like at the end of the day, it's managing of budgets. So what a lot of charities don't have is an in-house team to be able to help their family carers return to the world of work. So they know that they can refer then that their family carers, whether it could be, you know, someone that's at home minding their dad who has Alzheimer's, or someone that has a child with a disability. Every family carer has their own charity that they link into, depending on maybe the illness or the sickness the person in their family has. So the charity then knows that maybe they don't have the resources in-house to be able to help this person find work. So we then collaborate together, and we have those opportunities to partner up to be able to help their family carers. But the charity in-house then, like I said, they don't have the team to be able to do that, so that we can, you know, to work together on those partnerships. So that's the three approaches that we would have. It's to help the employers to fill your vacancies, because like I said, you know, it's one of the slides that I'm going to be talking about in a moment is to do with the recruitment crisis that's in Ireland right now. So to be able to help employers to fill those vacancies with skilled staff, like I said, family carers having so many different skills. It's been mentioned so many times throughout this morning is the soft skills the family carers have. As you said, for a lot of people, they don't have them. It's not something that can be trained on. And if it can, it's quite hard to do sometimes. So those soft skills are phenomenal. So for the employers, the family carers, and the charities. If you just pop on then, Caroline, onto the next slide. Again, what I just mentioned there about the soft skills. So again, these skills are CV worthy. So many family carers that haven't recognised over all the years that these are the skills that they have. They're, you know, using these skills on a day-to-day basis when it comes to the management of, you know, having to deal with the HSC, have to deal with, for some people, maybe 5, 6 different consultants, you know, trying to come up with different solutions of when a hospital appointment gets cancelled, or, oh, there's so many different things. So there's so many scenarios a family care has to deal with on a daily basis, that if you could imagine that those scenarios applying in a business-to-business world, the same skills can be applied to it. So to know that those skills are CV worthy, but for employers to recognise that they're worthy as well. So what we would always ask is that if you see a CV, and a gap on a CV, like I said, that's because I know that an employer would ask, you know, I see a gap on your CV, would you like to tell me a bit more about that? I know legally you can't delve too further down more than that, but to recognise if someone says to you, I had to take a year out to look after mom, or, you know, the last 2 years there's been a lot of sickness in the house and I've had to take a step out for that, that be recognised, and to know that all these skills are being developed during that 2 years of step out. What I would always do is to encourage family carers themselves to include the fact that they were a family carer on their CV, and to be very, very proud of that, because like I said, is that it's those skills that are, again, we keep talking about them, the soft skills that are so CV worthy, but for a family carer for him or herself to recognise that. So for them to encourage them to put that family caring period of time on their CV, and the skills associated with that time of what they developed over the, whether it be a year or 2 or whatever it may be. Just looking here, yeah. So like I said, that's the CV worthy. I think on the second slide again, if you hop on, Caroline, again, it's just another slide of the different skills. So it just goes to show the list of skills that family care has. So as an employer, for you to benefit from those skills and to recognise them. Because someone could have all the degrees in the world, but still not be maybe personable, still not have those personality traits of honesty and trustworthiness, or that resilience. They could have 3 degrees under their belt and have all the qualifications, but if they can't adapt to a situation or communicate brilliantly with people, or, you know, think on their feet and come up with problem solving, all the degrees in the world, you can have the paper, but like I said, not have those soft skills to be able to have that. So as an employer, just for you to be able to recognise that. Popping on to the next slide then, Caroline, what you should be looking at now is just snippets of different newspapers. Again, as I said to you, it's been mentioned, I attend different recruitment webinars, again, just representing jobs to family carers, and it's been talked about out there at the moment is that recruitment shortage that's happening at the moment, that people that have moved from one industry when COVID hit, people retrained and moved on to a different industry. When businesses opened back up, the staff that they had originally weren't there anymore. So again, as an employer, for you to realise that, that this cohort of people, family carers in Ireland, there's thousands and thousands of them that are, Zoe mentioned it there, many of them want to work. thousands and thousands of them, as I said, wanted to work. But the government has put in place these stipulations for them regarding how much they're allowed to earn, the 18.5 hours per week. So to meet us halfway, to be able to say, well, do you know what, instead of a part-timer of 21 hours or 24 hours, we can do 18.5 hours, and to be able to help you fill those vacancies because of that flexibility on the hours. And to get Ireland through this recruitment crisis, because like I said, it's not just about the family carers, it's about everyone. I often say that I want family carers to thrive and succeed and bounce back after COVID, but I want Ireland itself to bounce back and succeed and thrive after COVID as well. And that comes down to businesses and employers. And popping on to the next slide, Caroline, there you should be just seeing just a few statistics. So like I said, just at the moment, Jobs for Family Carers, as I said, is new business in 2019. So over 3,000 family carers registered with us looking for employment right now. So in 2021, 157 companies were contacted to propose that flexibility on their advertised part-time vacancy. That's where I mentioned about, rather than it being the 21 hours, could we do 18.5 hours if that person was the right person? And 86% of the companies said yes. Like this being one of the quotes there, it's not about being rigid on the hours, but finding the right person. And that's always the brilliant answer. I love to hear an answer like that. Usually when I get a no answer, and again, it's understandable no more than what Zoe was talking about in the funding, is that when they have a role that has been, the role has been secured through funding piece that the company has gotten, usually that their funding is written into the funding piece that this role is for 24 hours or whatever it may be. So they have to adhere to that. But what they always say is, do you know what, in future now we know. Now we know about the 18.5 hours. We didn't know about that to start with. So now we know that going forward, 18.5 hours is something that we need to take into consideration. So again, there's the education piece with employers as well, but it's about having those conversations. What I love as well is when we talked about over the morning is the confidence of family carers. Some family carers are fantastic. They're coming out of Kaleidoscope with this confidence of being able to ask employers, ringing them up themselves to say, I saw an advertisement for 24 hours, but I can only do 18.5. Would you be able to, to meet me on that? But for those family carers who don't have that confidence to have the conversation, I would get messages saying, look, I'm after seeing this job in Waterford. I'm perfect for it. I know I can do it, but it's 21 hours. Would you mind having that conversation with them for me? And that's what Jobs for Family Carers is about. It's that go-between to be able to introduce that conversation. Because again, as I said, the employer might know about the 18.5 hours, and it's about, to just that education piece that's there. Caroline, just popping on to the next slide again. So the benefits to you as the employer. So again, to advertise with Jobs for Family Care, as I mentioned earlier on, traditional recruitment methods, they charge a rate based on the placement or the percentage of the salary of that successful candidate. Whereas our specialised recruitment solutions provide a space to advertise that vacancy and help your vacancy be filled with skilled people free of charge. So the website that's down there, so jobsforfamilycarers.ie. So if you want to visit that website, there's a form that you can just fill out, and any vacancies that you have at all that will meet that 18.5 hour criteria, let us help you fill them. We can, like I said, get the word out to family carers in your area and get those family carers that have the skills and the professionalism lined up in front of you so that you as an employer can get your team right and get the vacancies filled. And readily available resources. So to have people start on your team within 1 week. So recently, so actually it's a very recent number, so 130 family carers were asked, just as a sample, as to how much notice they would need in order to start an 18.5 per week job. And an average of a week was the response. So again, going back to if you're advertising at the moment, and we'll say someone is moving from one job into another and they get paid monthly in the previous job, they usually have to give, if you're getting paid monthly, you usually have to give a month's notice. So to know that you can actually have, a skilled person lined up for you within a week. Now, for a lot of employers, a week is even very fast because you need to have their desk ready, or you need to have set the details up in payroll and things like that. So, but to know that they're readily available, and to you as an employer, when you need someone to be able to come in and help your team and support your business, time is of the essence. So they're just some of the benefits to you. Popping on to the next slide, Caroline, if you don't mind, and I'm just wrapping up. Very much coming soon. Jobs for Family Carers is changing to Count on Us recruitment. The reason it's changing, we're having a full rebrand, and you'll all be hearing about it, but Jobs for Family Carers, we as family carers, and I say we because I'm a family carer myself, we know what Jobs for Family Carers means. Thousands of family carers across Ireland knows what Jobs for Family Carers means. But you as an employer, what we've discovered is that when an employer sees Jobs for Family Carers, the first thing you think of, but I'm not hiring family care, I'm not hiring a caring role. Whereas the Count on Us recruitment now, like I said, is that more specialised name. It's still doing the exact same thing. So finding employment opportunities for family carers around their caring commitments. But the reason Count on Us was picked was because I feel very, very strongly that to count on us, not just as a service provider, but to count on us as a cohort of thousands of family carers in Ireland, that the HSE counts on us, the government counts on us, family counts on us. So definitely as an employer, when it comes to family carers coming onto your team as part of your business, you can count on us. Of all the soft skills and all the things that have been talked about this morning when it comes to dependability, trustworthiness, like that problem solving skill, being able to think on your feet. Like I said, when it comes to an employer, count on us is just the definition behind it. So count on family carers when you're moving forward. And that's the last slide. So I ran through that because I know I was to finish at 12:30, so that's I'm 4 minutes over. So like I said, if anyone wants to get in contact with me, jobsforfamilycarers.ie, I'd love to have a chat with you about getting those vacancies to family carers so that you can in turn fill your vacancies, but to help family carers get back into the workforce as well. So thanks a million for that.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Does anyone have any questions for Fiona? No?
Sorry, Lisa. I was just wondering when she said that she had spoken to 157 companies, were they all larger companies or small, medium-sized, sort of roughly the breakdown?
Brilliant question. Small to medium enterprises really is where I would have been in contact with. And what I'm finding is it was the small to medium enterprises as well that when it comes to budget, don't have, especially after COVID, didn't have the budget right now to have full-time staff. So to be able to match that budget to have the part-time experience, part-time perspective on it. So definitely small to medium enterprise would be a huge cohort of employers that you're talking about. What we're very much looking to do is for corporates, really for corporates to start coming on board. There's a collaboration piece that I'm doing with Royal London right now, and Royal London in Dublin are actually looking to create specifically 18.5-hour contracts for family carers, because again, it's just they're so definitely, like I said, it's for corporates to start getting on board with the same rationale and the same outlook, because those skills can be applied regardless of what entity they are. The same skills can be applied to any team, you know. Thank you very much for that one.
Thanks, Vera. Does anyone else have any questions? No, I think we're all good. Fiona, thanks a million. I always enjoy listening to your presentations because they're very much, you know, things have always changed since the last time you present. So it's just great. It's great to hear about Count on Us as well. And we work very closely with you anyway, but we really wish you the very best luck. I'm not sure you would have been here earlier, Fiona, but when you look back at the video, Siobhan from the Knoll Group was talking about the 18.5 hours and about the lack of awareness amongst employers about the 18.5 hours. So I think, you know, as you say, when you look back on it, you'll be able to see where Siobhan is from. You might want to get in contact with her. She said she often offers contracts at 20 hours, but it's more a lack of awareness around the 18.5 hours, not the inability to offer it, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thanks. Listen, thanks a million for that. We are just going to finish off with breakout rooms. I'm going to put you into 2 breakout rooms. Zoe is going to facilitate one room and Caroline is going to facilitate the other room. And I just have 2 questions really. The first one is, what will you take away from today's webinar? And the second one is, what one carer-friendly initiative could you bring or suggest to your employer following this webinar? The 2 facilitators have the 2 questions, and I'll get you back in after about 10 minutes, and I'll just ask maybe one representative from each group just to feedback the general consensus of the group, and then I will close the webinar. So I'm just going to open the rooms now and see you all in about 10 minutes. Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
It's always a good sign when people don't jump back in straight away when the 60 seconds comes by. They must be having some things to chat about. So yeah, welcome back everybody. If we start with group 1, do you want to, whoever said they would present, do they want to come back and tell us what they discussed?
Were we group 1?
Yeah, which was group 1?
I'll say you are Caroline. Caroline, you're group 1, yeah.
Okay. So our first question, what will you take away from today's webinar? So what David Grayson discussed was really interesting. So open communication would be one really important thing. So I suppose between yourself as, you know, if you're at an interview with an employer, that open communication between the 2 of you, and that, you know, you are highlighting exactly what you can provide, and that in turn the employer is, you know, letting you know what they require from you. Large corporates need to be educated more on what carers can provide. So again, it's the 18.5 hours that carers can work, and maybe, you know, the salary thresholds of, you know, if it goes over a certain amount, you know, if your allowances are going to be affected. This is obviously important for family carers. A lot of organizations need to be aware that they probably are already employing a lot of family carers that they don't even know about. So a really good point was, you know, that you could be up in the middle of the night and you could have spent 3 hours, you know, looking after the person you're caring for, and you might get back to bed and have 2 hours sleep, and you have to perform at 9 o'clock the next morning in your job role, and, you know, your manager might not even know that, you know, this is all going on in the background. Work-life balance in companies does not work if your line manager is not trained. So, you know, if a company has a work-life balance policy in place, you know, it sounds great. And, you know, if you're joining a company and you're reading that they have this as part of their working policy, but your line manager doesn't understand when you go to them, and you might need to take, you know, a half day to bring your child or whoever you're caring for to an appointment, you know, it's just not going to work. You're going to feel anxious, you know, you're going to feel that you can't actually, you know, go and ask for the time off, when in fact this is something that they're advertising that is actually in place. Assertiveness is needed on both sides. So courage to stand up for yourself, to, you know, let your employer what you need, know what you need, and that there may be times that you do need to take a little bit of time off to go to an appointment, but to ensure them also that you will make up the time, and the same for their side, that, you know, that they will let you know what they need. So the second question then, so the Carer Friendly Initiative is really recommendations from you know, family carers that are in employment already, that they could, you know, inform their employers of other carers that they may know that they could recommend, fellow participants on the Kaleidoscope course, and then also internal communication. So within, say, for example, Fiona, she's communicating with all these different businesses to let them know that, you know, there are a lot of family carers out there who are willing to work and, you know, have the skills that are also required.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much, Caroline. Thank you. And Zoe, what about your group?
So our group, I mean, there's some things that are very similar, so I'm not going to repeat those. I suppose from the what will you take away, the individual stories from Stephanie and Caroline were very powerful, and I think that that's something that people will take away. They said it was, so I'm not just saying that it was. And having that kind of and also something similar to that was that awareness is really important for family carers. So carers themselves to be aware of who they are and what they have and what they can bring, and that they are a family carer. But then also awareness is really important for organizations, employers to have awareness of family carer issues, if you know what I mean, at a general level.
Yeah.
Something else that came in was looking at maybe larger organizations, bigger, perhaps corporate organizations, looking at, you know, whether or not their policies are kind of care approved. And again, you know, the feedback was that, you know, David Grayson's input was particularly interesting at that level, you know what I mean, for that kind of policy piece for employers. And then also just general feedback around, you know, how family carers themselves see the changes that the department have made over time, you know, kind of moving from 10 to 12 to 15 to 18 and a half hours over time, and how that has impacted and still continues to impact family carers' return to the workplace. Yeah, just the idea of what is flexibility. I suppose being flexible, you know, an organization may think they're being really flexible, but actually it's not necessarily the right flexibility or the appropriate flexibility in all cases. And also that comes from the carers as well. They may feel they're being very flexible, but it's not the kind of flexibility that is required. So so that was kind of the guts of what we spoke about for the first one. So moving on, then we have two kind of initiatives that people mentioned. So the first one was creating a supported pathway where an employee can disclose that they are a family carer if they wish to. So having a dedicated, you know, very clear pathway that people are maybe in an employee handbook, that they're sort of, if you are a family carer, you know, please, you know, you can disclose this if you wish to, and these supports will then be kind of made open to you, which I thought was a really interesting idea, that it's very clear, very delineated, but family carers aren't necessarily expected to do that. So you can choose if you want, because some family carers just want to go into work, forget about the fact that they're a carer, just ignore it completely, and then do their shift and come home, or do their document and come home, or whatever it might be. And then the final one is that to address the idea of confidence, because obviously that came back over and over again. So, you know, building confidence building confidence building exercises or elements into, say, team building or whatever it might be. An example was maybe that you know, people could be asked, you know, well, what skills do you bring from outside work into work? So people could then identify their family carer skills if they wish to, but they could also talk about a hobby. So it's not just focusing only on the family carer about what they bring from home or outside of work into the work environment to support them in their work, or to kind of what those skills that they have that are outside of the traditional ones. So I'll leave it there.
Brilliant. That's
Thank
great.
you to my group for
Thanks.
really good discussions, by the way.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Thanks a million, everyone, for participating in that. And we will collate what the two ladies have spoken about on, because we are recording. So we will collate that and we will present it to everyone who's attended in a document, so that, you know, you have something to take away. I'm not going to keep everyone too much longer, because I know it's been a long morning, but I just really want to say thank you to everyone who's presented, and thank you to everyone who has participated, asked questions, stuck the course till now. We really do appreciate it. One thing that struck me this morning is the 18.5 hours and the lack of awareness amongst employers about the 18.5 hours. So I definitely think there's a piece of work to be done on that, raising the awareness. And the other thing, and we have discussed it all morning, is confidence and mindset of carers when they are looking for work. So there definitely is a piece of work to be done on that as well. And I suppose we feel very passionately that, you know, someone who is entering the work, you know, the workplace, or is looking for a job, that, you know, they might not necessarily need 12 weeks of Kaleidoscope, the intensity of that, but there's definitely a piece of work that needs to be done around confidence building before they enter into their job, and then possibly a piece around the transition and making that, you know, a comfortable and safe transition for the person into the employment, but also making sure that the employer's needs are met. So they were the things that struck me this morning. But yeah, I just want to say thank you very much for everyone who has attended. It's been a fantastic morning, and we will get the video to you. It'll be either the end of this week or early next week that we get the video, and we will collate the very end information from the breakout rooms and send that out as well. So yeah, good morning, good afternoon, I should say now, and hope everyone has a nice lunch, and thanks a million for everyone for attending. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Lovely.
Thanks.
Well done. Bye.
Thank you.